Life is a lot like beekeeping. Beekeeping isn't easy, and at times can be downright tough. Sometimes you feel like you're on an island, that you're not making a difference, and that you're on your own. But just remember, the darkest hour is just before dawn. There are those out there shining a light, being the change, and being a lighthouse. You're not alone. There's an incredible community of folks who want to help, who want to lift you up, and want to see you do well. Like the honeybee is to the hive, we're better together. With hard work, if we work together, and with a little help from above, all things are possible. It's not just about keeping bees. It's about being our brother's keeper. Be the lighthouse. Well, hey guys, welcome back to another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. If you're tuning in live from the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel, checking out the replay later, or checking out the podcast, thanks for joining us tonight. There's a lot going on in the beekeeping world right now, and a lot of folks have questions. A lot of folks are curious as to not only critical next steps with one of the biggest beekeeping conferences in the country, but also what is going on in their neck of the woods this time of year. What are those critical next steps to keeping those colonies healthy, moving forward, and ready for wintertime? So we thought there'd be no better person to ask to come on to glean some wisdom from, and also give us some updates about the North American Bee Expo. So once again, it's our honor to have the one and only Kamon Reynolds. Kamon, welcome back.
Hey guys, you see I'm trying to compete with Brian and Greg right there on the beard. It's going to be a while, I think. Good to be back on, and thanks for having me yet again. Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in to the Stream Team and Kamon Reynolds, I guess, on the side. So I tell you, if this keeps up, I'm just going to have to be like kind of like Shemp with the Three Stooges. You're just going to have to kind of get that fourth person in there. But all jokes aside, no, we got a lot of exciting things going on. We'll talk some August beekeeping, because here in Tennessee, This is one of the toughest times of the year, and with kids going to school, things happening, and it's hot and it's humid down here, but it's a very critical time. So I'm really passionate about late July, August, and early September beekeeping. I think that's the most people underestimate the importance of those months, and we'll get into that. So, everyone wants to know when tickets are available. Well, we got the answer tonight. So,
I came in. I'm sure you're getting tired of, or tired's not the word. Overwhelmed with requests and emails and phone calls and messages saying, "Oh, I don't want to get left in the dust. I don't want to miss out. When can I buy my tickets?" Folks are just so excited about the North American Honeybee Expo. What can you tell us? What are some new developments with the Bee Expo, Kamon?
Well, so first of all, the tickets are going to open this Friday. That is going to be at 7 p.m. Central Time. So be ready. There will be on our website, and that will be available. Obviously, we'll be announcing that on our Facebook group, my personal Facebook group. I'll share it with you guys if you want to share it on your respective anything that you want to. And, tickets are going to go live. And I'm pretty excited about how every venue you go to, there's logistics to work through. In some ways, it's more difficult. In some ways, it's better. And there's some opportunities here in Louisville that are really nice. And I think people are going to be very excited about what we can do this year. I'll go into a couple of those details, but I can't give it all away yet. One of the things I will talk about, though, is vendors. For those who are wanting to be vendors, I've been trying to keep up with everybody who's emailed me. We are going to have the full vendor information available on the 14th, and we have gotten rudimentary stuff out there, but there's a lot of people wanting to come, a lot of new stuff that we've never had before from out of country. I had someone contact us from South Africa this week wanting to set up a booth, so wow. I'm still waiting to hear what they've got, but I imagine it's quite a bit different than what we have here in the U.S., so I'm super excited about that. I imagine that they have I don't know for sure. I haven't really studied a lot of South African beekeeping, but I imagine they're using the African honeybee. And, I imagine the differences there with how to interact, type of bee equipment. Maybe it's not that different. I don't really know. That'd be something that I'm really interested to learn about. And that's what's really the most fun, I think, at this event is the energy. These vendors are chomping at the bit. Several of them are in the chat. Terry Chapman for one of them. Oh, John Hatch. Hope you're doing good up there in Vermont. So the new Louisville Slugger, well, I'd be more like Yogi Berra if I was going to be a baseball player, for sure. Short and goofy. So that is going to be Friday the 4th when tickets are available. And, people have wondered, when do they sell out? You should and will have are two different things. But I imagine you'll at least have 2 to 3 months to get your tickets. That varies from year to year, and it's gotten shorter as we've done more of these things. Also, so the vendors, August 14th. That's when we should have all the information to you by then. It could be by the 7th. That's what I'm hoping for. Now, the kid program, we also plan to launch on the 14th as well. So if you know any young beekeepers that are between the age of 12, we'll go down to 11 this year. I'm going to drop 1 year. Last year we had a young man who was really cool at 11 years old, and I hated turning him down because of the age group that we set. So we're going to drop it to 11 to 18 years of age. Be ready for that. That'll be announced. It's Amber with Vita Pharma. I actually was working on editing that footage today. That was a fun interview, and thanks for doing that with your team and yourself, Amber. So they're flying all the way from France, so another country represented, and we appreciate what they do, developing products to protect our honeybees. So the kid program, any kids you know of, everybody out there, let them know it's going to be covering their hotel, their guardian's ticket, and their ticket. And right now, based on we're honoring everything that we've had in the past, and so we're probably looking at, by the time the conference rolls around, 30 full rides, and that's going to be awesome. Is there a limit on ticket purchase per person/household? Are you Is Jose trying to scalp tickets?
Love it.
You're one of the speakers, man. You can't be scalping tickets, man. He's going to be out on the Louisville streets, like, making all kinds of money. He's like, forget beekeeping. No, I don't think there's going to be a limit. I mean, last year we had one group get 8 tickets. And I know it was at least 2 families that did that. They all drove down together. Big old homeschooler type van. You know, those big white ones. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Those
yeah. We call them Yoder toters is what we call them here.
Yep, Yoder toters. So we have several homeschool families in this area. You know, they'll have like 10 kids, 8 kids, so they have to have these big vans. And the only time you ever see these vans typically is around here is when there's homeschoolers, or you're watching a television show and it's like an armored, vehicle for some type of presidential, got to move the VIP or whatever. But we see a lot of those vans with these homeschoolers with like 11 kids. We're also looking into a couple other things. We got a lot of stuff to announce. I can't get to too much. We'll have the hotels announced soon. We've got several already underway. There's a lot of hotels in this area, so I wouldn't sweat it. If I remember correctly, one of the ladies that runs the tourism in Louisville was telling me within like just a handful of miles, there's like 14,000 rooms. So there's a lot of hotels available, and we're working with several hotels to get discounts and all that kind of stuff. So if we can save you $15 a night, you stay for 3 nights, it's $45. And we'd like to be able to do that. The honey show, everyone be prepared for that one. It's going to be a whopper. We got the Welsh judges from the gosh, I never can remember their full name. It's maybe even harder than the North American Honeybee Expo. For short, I'm just kind of referring to it as the Bee Expo. It's a lot easier. Or Laurel's Conference. That's also apropos for the situation. So that's kind of where we're at, but a lot of things in the work right now. Can't talk about all of them yet because there's several things that have to be locked down, but we've got some fun stuff for people who are wanting just to have a fun time and chat with their bee buddies. We're going to have some fun activities off to the side. Nothing mandatory. There's nothing worse than going to an event and then you have all this schedule that you have to adhere to. I've been to some of those, and at our conference, it's pretty free to do whatever you want. If you don't want to listen to any of the speakers, just hang out in the trade show and talk to the guys making the product or talk to another beekeeper the whole time. We've got some activities that you can chat and have fun at the same time. So it's going to be fun, and you guys are going to be there with all your stuff. So Matthew Booth says ticket prices. Well, I was going to kind of leave that for Friday. I'm going to leave that one for Friday. So last year, tickets with fees and stuff like that, if you did like PayPal and whatever, it was pushing it, early bird was a little over $190, and with PayPal later, it was closer to $200 with meals. It's going to be less than that.
Nice.
So I will tell you that. So there's going to be a little bit more options and freedom. This venue lets us have a little bit more creativity, and I like creativity and freedom. I also like food choices.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have some food choices this year.
Nice.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say it, all right? I don't think Laurel can hear me right now. Maybe she's watching.
There's nobody watching other than it's just us four.
That's right. Everyone, you just
Your
keep this
secret's
to
safe
yourself,
there.
okay? So in the past, we've done like catered stuff, and that's always been a little bit of an issue. They have a hard time when you have 2,000 people just hit it all at once. That's just a lot. Just logistically, it's not easy to be able to handle that. And then, we get a lot of these guys from the South that eat like 3 full plates apiece. And, what do you do? Yes, I am looking at you, Bruce. You know what it's like down there. Half a gallon of sweet tea.
Yeah, man,
all that stuff.
We know how to eat down here.
We do. We do. We appreciate everything that we get, though. Chris is face palming. Oh, come on, Chris. Don't be like that. Chris helps a lot with the conference, but that's part of the job is literally having to deal with me. So deal with it. And Laurel didn't know what she signed up for when she married me. Poor thing. Anyways, so we're going to have food options actually there. So if you want to go down, you want to get some barbecue, get it. We might even be able to have Jose's burrito and taco truck available. And it won't be Taco Bell. We looked into that option just for spite, but they didn't have it available.
That'd be great.
No, Taco Bell's really not that great. Am I going to get you striked for saying that?
Nah.
I don't think so. But there's going to be some more options. And, what I like about that, too, is, hey, someone had an early morning. Some people, get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning. They start their breakfast early, or they skip breakfast, and they're hungry by 11 o'clock. We've always had a very rigid, this is when you get your lunch. This is going to be a lot more free, so you can get out there, and you wanted your lunch at 11, get it at 11. You want to wait till 1, get it at 1, a lot more flexibility. And I like to eat quite a bit, too, so... by the sound of it, though, it's going to be really difficult to pick between all these cool things. So,
It came in honor of Jose. We need to have fried okra. He loves that.
Oh,
stuff.
that's it. Fried okra tacos.
Yeah.
He'd be all over that.
And a taco, that might actually be pretty good. I never considered fried okra in a taco. I just had some homemade okra just 3 days ago. A buddy of mine, we both garden. And so I brought over some of the onions that I raised in my garden, and he had some okra. And I think my onions were superior. However, that okra was pretty darn good. He fried that sucker up.
That's good stuff.
It is.
Jose's favorite. If anyone sees Jose at the North American Honeybee Expo, and you just want to really show your appreciation for the kind of guy that he is, what I would recommend is you just bring just like big brown paper sacks just full of okra. He is going to just love it. Absolutely love it.
Take that back on the plane with them. The California folks be like, TSA are like, what is this? And, I know there's a lot of people in California that knows what that is, but maybe not flying into San Francisco, though. They might be, Tennessee stuff coming this way.
It's probably legal there, though. They can smuggle okra in probably. They can get anything else there, I guess.
Have we told you the story of Jose and the fried okra? Have you heard this story?
I have not heard this story, but I think I'm fixing to learn it.
Well, Greg, go ahead and tell them. You tell the best.
Well, we found a nice barbecue place to sit down, break bread, get to know each other. And we thought, Jose came all the way to Sevierville, Tennessee from California. Like, what would be the most authentic local thing to eat? And everyone's like, well, barbecues, pretty right up the alley for the neighborhood. And so we found a little place. I can't think of the name of it, but we're all sitting down to eat, and Jose's like, what should I get? It looks like there's like brisket and pulled pork and like some of the stuff you're semi-familiar with. And we're all like, oh, dude, you totally got to get the okra. So he ordered the okra, and he gets it there, and we're sitting down to eat, and he's like, well, like, what do I do with this? And I said, what do you mean, what do you do with it? Like, how do you eat it? And I said, we start by just putting it in your mouth and start chewing on it. And he grabbed one of these things, and he's kind of like looking at it and smelling it, and he's just like, what in the world did these hillbillies get me into? And he puts it in and starts to chew on it. And it was like, those faces, like when you have like a 6-month-old or up to like a year, and they first start to eat those things, and they'll eat like a lemon or something, and they'll just give you that face like, what in the world's going on here? That's what his face was. His face was, what in the world am I chewing on? And then, so the joke is, Jose's favorite way to eat okra is to order just a jumbo plate of it, and then peel all the batter off, and then throw the okra away. He just ate the batter and called it good.
okra is really healthy for you. Now, once you deep fry the sucker, that might make that kind of canceled out just a little bit, but it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. And if you fry the chicken and you fry the okra, and and you have some nice mashed potatoes or green beans or anything drizzled with some bacon grease, now you're talking about food that you're okay if it takes you out. If you die that way, I mean, what a way to go.
What a way to go.
Exactly. Throw some butter beans in there. Gotta have some butter beans in there too. Yeah.
I think
just good stuff.
It's kind of like Ron Swanson, it's America. If you want to blow up to 500 pounds and die at a younger age, I think you should have the freedom to do so. And gosh, here we go. So,
Kamon, where can folks find out? Where can they find tickets on sale this Friday?
So, if you follow us on Facebook, the North American Honeybee Expo Facebook group, or my personal Facebook, that's going to be one location. It'll also be on YouTube and various places, but the tickets will be on the website, and we will send out that website on different platforms. I'll send it to you guys too, so people who follow you, just watch out for YouTube and watch out for Facebook posts. Also, we have a lot of people's emails, and so if they've emailed us about the conference, we'll be totally sending that to them as well. So there's a lot of different places to learn about it. So far, it's hard to know exactly where things are going to be, but given the attention that we received, I think 2,000 is going to be easy to hit. And so tickets are going to go pretty quick. And, the vendors are going at it. A lot of the vendors that came last year, they're asking for 30 to 100% more booth space, percentage-wise. And then, there's a lot of new vendors that are coming in. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that we're going to have somewhere around 70 to 85,000 square feet of vendors in this show. And so it's going to be quite a bit of fun. And one of the things I like to stress the most is anyone who buys, that's able to drive and buy stuff, you're going to be able to pay for this ticket and your savings. No problem. Unless you buy that Dirt Rooster merchandise. That stuff is way overpriced. Way overpriced. All jokes aside, just in the Pollen Patties, we will have probably 30,000 to 40,000 pounds of bulk Pollen Patties brought in on a semi-load. And we're able to get that for, well, if you were buying 10 pounds and had them shipped to your door, you're probably paying around $4 a pound. And at the conference, we're going to be able to have them probably for $1.70, $1.80. I haven't looked at what inflation has done. So if you buy, only 10 pounds, well, you'll save half of what you would have online. Or if you buy a bunch, you'll save quite a bit. And then, of course, you guys have a lot of valuable stuff sold at your booth, wax-dipped equipment. You guys going to have buckets again this year and various things.
Right, yeah. We'll have bucket feeders, plugs, wax-dipped boxes, bottom boards, tops, some other fun stuff we're working on too. That'll be wax-dipped. We kind of, one thing what I really appreciate about the vendors at the conference is everyone, they want to see everybody do well. And we all, what's very commendable, and it's not common in a lot of these spaces, is we kind of know all the other vendors. And I think what we do really well is we also try to stay in our lanes on what we do, where we can bring value and excitement to the attendees and the conference. And so while you will see some products overlap, a lot of times where some guys could bring a lot of the same thing, they don't. They stay in the lane with what they're known for, what they do well, where they can actually bring value. And I really respect that with a lot of the folks that are a part of this kind of a conference. So this year, again, we'll have wax-dipped boxes. Of course, we'll definitely be representing Premier Bee products, boxes and frames and things like that too, bucket feeders, plugs. And what I'm really excited about is we're going to need a lot more space this year, because one of the really cool things that kind of happened with Kamon's conference is as we kind of threw the podcast studio into our booth, it just kind of grows and grows and grows and needs more space. And this year, what I'd like to do is have a much larger setup where we can have an even bigger studio setup where we can maybe even get a few chairs set up and some screens, so folks can actually be a part and see this and have a more of an interactive podcast where we can have folks who are speaking can come by and we can talk and interview, but also capture stories and such from the beekeepers, from the attendees, and then get that out on our platform too. It's always fun to learn how other folks keep bees and learn a little bit more about who they are, speakers as well. But the Nature's Image Farm podcast booth is definitely going to be something that I'm really excited for, and bringing the stream team integrated into that's going to be awesome.
It's awesome having you guys there, but you're already asking for more space, Greg. Come on, man.
Already asking for more space. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now's the time. I mean, I'm not going to promise you anything, but I will tell you we got a lot more room to work with this year. So the vendors are going to be able to basically have whatever they want, and there's just a whole lot more availability to be creative with, since we're not going to be so tight. You know, it still will be. I mean, it's not going to be like we're just all really spread out or anything. There's going to be a lot of people in there, but vendors are going to be able to have more room in their booths for people to be able to walk in and get out of the aisles. And this year, I'm going to spread the aisles just a little bit further apart, not a lot further. You don't want them too wide. But I was thinking probably add another 3 or 4 feet between aisles would be nice, because especially for vehicles, moving those in and out of there, when people are pulling a bunch of your wax dip boxes through or something, that would be helpful. And speaking of wax dip boxes, there was a comment about your wax dip boxes from Drew. Oh, you
question
Greg.
is, with the wax dip boxes, can they be re-dipped after a few years? I want more of them from Greg. Well, Drew, appreciate that. Thanks. The thing with wax dip boxes is that's a whole other conversation for a different day. But the long and short of wax dip boxes, there's an enormous amount of science behind it, but more importantly, an art to wax dipping. The length of time, the heat, the products used, it's not all done the same, and there are some differences. But one thing you can expect with wax dip boxes is for them to have more and more of a darker rosy color as time goes on. Now, different types of waxes can turn the boxes nearly black, or you can see mold growth and things like that, depending on the wood species, moisture contents, wax contents, how many solids, the particulars of that is a whole boring conversation. But if you tried to re-dip boxes, what you're initially doing is you're shedding off the external layers of wax and then trying to get all of the wax that's already in there liquid enough to take more wax into. When a wax dip box is done correctly, there's a fiber saturation point that's achieved. And once you achieve fiber saturation point with wax, it's sealed off. So all you're going to have is this. Ooh. Exactly. Sounds fancy, doesn't it?
It does. So, I didn't know you had words like that, Greg.
Can you believe that? I wrote that down right here so I could say it right. I just knew the question was
Google.
coming.
Okay.
Wrote it down. I Googled it. And so long story short, can you wax dip them, re-wax dip? Yes, you can. But I don't think if they were done correctly to begin with, you're not going to achieve any further internal protection. You might be touching up the external appearance of it. But if you're doing that, you're going to contaminate your wax tank with all kind of dirt and debris and schmutz. And I'm not sure that's probably the way to go either. But if you want to talk more or geek out about wax dipping, one of the little unknown things about us is we have some information in wood science with some prior businesses, so we can tend to geek out and use big words like fiber saturation point.
Oh boy, I'm gonna hear more about this in the future, I'm afraid. But I kind of walked into that door, so now I've got to live with it.
Thanks, Kamon.
Yeah, no problem, anytime. So this Charlie Vance asked, when will the website be up? It'll be up Friday too, and we'll be adding more to it, but there'll be a decent stuff on there already. The wizard Chris Medeiros has been working on that like crazy, and eventually the kids stuff will be on there too. Primarily with what we want from the kids is just for them to send a short YouTube video. It can be anywhere between 2 minutes to 10 minutes. Basically, we just want to hear from them. And I know might be a little awkward for them. It might be their first YouTube video. We don't judge. It's just going to be probably myself and Laurel looking at them like last time. And trust me, my first YouTube videos were nothing to get excited about, for sure. So we're just looking to see if the young men and women really are interested in bees, and they can talk a little bit about that. Then feel free to email that to us with, if you want to, maybe a paragraph or so of other information and some pictures if you want to. You can get fairly simple with it. You go into a decent bit of detail, and that's how we'll kind of evaluate that. So, but just mostly email communication on that. It'll probably take us, unfortunately we're later in the year this year, so I'm going to get that up here by the 14th at the latest. But then we really need to decide fairly soon, primarily for the young people's sake, so their parents can plan for this trip. No doubt, Chris, we appreciate you more than you know. Yeah, Chris does a ton of stuff. Thankfully, his place of employment, he does these kinds of things, and so I'm really not good with a lot of the tech side of stuff. Actually, none of it. So one of the things that people keep asking about is the T-shirts, and I haven't got around to answering that. It's unlikely that we'll have T-shirts available at the same time as the tickets. We've really tried to. There's just so many other things that are important. Obviously, it would be awesome to be able to have that at the same time. That doesn't mean that we won't possibly have opportunities to have a conference T-shirt and then be able to maybe even send those out to folks beforehand, and then they can just show up with them all ready to go and have hundreds of people wearing them. We'll definitely have shirts at the conference, if nothing else, but we're just a new location, a lot of restarting on several things, so it's taken a little bit of time to fix everything and get it where it needs to be. But we'll have some T-shirts and some cool stuff like that. As far as Jeff Jeffers asked a question at 7:28, and this is one I really wanted to get to. Do you know what kind of discounts vendors are offering? So I do know of a couple. Can't talk much about them, though, as far as the really good, juicy details. But what I can tell you is that we've always had wonderful pricing on boxes and frames and foundation and pollen patties, and we always have a good price on extractors. I mean, bottling tanks, uncapping tanks. One thing you have to consider, especially with the bigger equipment, if you need an extractor, if you need an uncapping tank or a bottling tank, anything big like that, or like behind Greg, you have those hive butlers, right? It really helps. Shipping's not cheap, so that helps you out a lot. Especially with the bigger equipment, you might save $150, $200 or more dollars just on the shipping, which way more than pays for your ticket. And then on top of that, if you get some frames and foundation, and there's different levels of value, right? So if you get an unassembled box, you're going to get a good price on that. But you can also get waxed it boxes from Greg, and then you take that thing home and you don't have to worry about painting it or anything like that. And I hate painting. It's there's lots of things that I hate. One beekeeper told me that there's a lot of hate in my heart. However, I do not like varroa mites. I do not like them. I don't like small hive beetles. I hate them. I hate painting, and I hate wiring in wax foundation. I really hate that. Mm-hmm. I have nothing but respect for people who are like purists on they just want the wax foundation. But if you guys ever wired in a few thousand of those suckers,
yeah, no. And still have the jig hanging on the wall as a hate monument.
It's a hate monument. So we were all deeps for a while, and early on, I get the wax foundation from Kelly's, and they have the wires that go down, but it's not enough. It's going to sag, and we end up with these combs that are really cupped. And so we would cross wire them. We'd start in the one corner, we go down, go up the side of the frame, go back down as an X, nail each side in and tighten it, and then you have to embed that into the wax. So much fun.
It was kind of cool at first because you're like, oh, cool. You're MacGyver, and here's a little battery and 2 jumper wires, and I'm hooking it up to the side, and you're thinking, there's no way this is. But I was thinking about that recently because we do have, a little bit of wax foundation here, but no one's buying it, and usually it's the first year beekeeper who that's what they think they want. They come in, they buy it, and then they're back. 3 weeks later, they're back, and they're like, I am never ever doing that again. And I always tell them, well, you know what? You have to do a lot of these things. Assemble boxes, assemble your frames, put in those sheets of wax. You have to do that and do a lot of it. And then you can really appreciate when stuff comes assembled or stuff comes in on a skid, or you're able to make a bulk buy. That's one of the beautiful things about Kamon, the conferences that you put on, is you put so many vendors together where you can go to Guardian Bee Apparel and you can try on the jacket. You can see it, you can hold it, you can touch it, you can pick up one of these hive butlers, you can actually see the value in them, you can save on shipping. The same thing with Premier boxes and frames, be able to go see, hold, and especially in Premier's case, smell that foundation and how amazing it is. You just want to roll in it. There almost needs to be like a little booth off to the side where, no, actually there probably shouldn't be, because there'd be too many of us just rolling around in wax foundation. It smells so good. That you just can't help yourself. You just
that doesn't sound.
Wow!
I accidentally just said it. Oh my goodness! Old habits.
Hard
to break. So, a lot of good mentions of like Michael Palmer or Gus Mitchell as a speaker. There are several people pending. I just got some preliminary confirmation from Marla Spivak. So, unless something changes, it sounds like she's going to be there. We're just, the only thing to finalize is basically how much she wants as a speaker fee and stuff like that. But we're always cool with basically what people want. So Marla will be an awesome addition to the lineup. Yeah. Have a few more pending as well, and we're looking at a couple right now, trying to find some unique stuff in there quite a bit. I also wish that Gus was still doing YouTube. I haven't talked to him in a month or so. And Terry Chapman up here is already throwing down the gauntlet on a discount for the conference. So 15% off everything. So wow. Terry does bee suits, Guardian Bee Apparel. So there you go. So 15% off there. If it's a $150 jacket, that's a 15% off. Wow. So 10% of that would be $15. We're looking like $20 off of a bee jacket if it was $150. So that's the kind of savings. The vendors are very generous at this conference because they want to see you and get to talk to you. So someone asked about talking about bee stuff, Greg, and I said I'd be on about 10 to 20 minutes, but yeah. Before Laurel pulls you off to make you go weed your garden, we wanted to ask you a couple questions about beekeeping, and one comment we'll get to first before we forget is Chris Madera's asks if we're offering babysitting on Saturday. He has both the kiddos with him. This Saturday at the Learning Yard, we've got the one and only Rob Pollock and Lori. They're coming from Maryland to talk to us about what you have there, Kamon. Honey, of course.
Throat therapy.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just.
What is it? Who's it from?
It's from Lindsay.
That's down here.
Farm.
Down here in Alabama.
Nice.
It's down here in
Okay.
Alabama. It's not far from me.
No.
Is that Lindsay Homestead?
He's in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't claim this, Bruce. This is pure Tennessee, honey. That's the only thing that Alabama is in second place to Tennessee on.
I got confused. I'm sorry.
Hold that back up again. Look at the color on that thing. That's nice.
It's beautiful.
Well, he won Blue Ribbon year before last
That's a good-looking label.
Light honey. I've got a jar of that somewhere around here. Yeah, he had some super, super light honey. This year was a little bit more yellow, but every year he produces way lighter honey than I do. I don't know how he does it.
Wow.
He just coaches the bees really good. But I was just showing off because he commented earlier, and I just wanted to show it off real quick. I wasn't trying to interrupt you, Greg. Sorry about that.
There it is. And I'll put it up there. Let's see it main big screen. There it is. Nice. Look at that label. That's cool. Well done. That's great. Now we get to watch you drink it. Nice.
All right, I'm feeling a buzz now.
Okay. Well, let's get to some questions. To answer Chris, yep, you can totally bring the kids. We're family and kid friendly. This Saturday here at the Learning Yard at Nature's Image Farm, we have Rob Pollock and Lori are coming out from Larabi's to talk to us about their vaporizers, the ins and the outs of it, when, why, how. And we're going to talk about it here in the shop, and then we're going to go out to the Learning Yard and demonstrate. So if you're interested in learning more about Larabi's, the INSTANTVAP vaporizer, and when and why oxalic acid may be a good fit for you and your bees, stop out. You can go to our website, naturesimagefarm.com, hit the contact us, shoot us a message, and we'll add you to the list of folks to be here. It's going to be awesome.
Quick comment on Brown and Daughters Honey. That's in Israel. That's Connor Brown. And he's got a YouTube channel he started up. He just had a really nice video he put up just a few days ago. And, he's
check it out.
It's interesting. I mean, it's very similar. He's got some bees on cotton and things like that, but just kind of seeing how he's doing things over there. He's originally from Louisiana, I believe, but he's over there. He lives over there now, so it's pretty cool stuff.
Nice. Kamon, one last question before we move on to beekeeping stuff. Jennifer Apiary asks, can you tell a little bit more about the honey swap? Is it going to be in glass or plastic?
Hey, Jennifer, that's something we're probably going to release a poll for because, I mean, to me, especially if people are bringing it, with them, whether it's driving or if they're shipping it in boxes to the hotel, which a lot of hotels with a certain size box will do that for you. A lot of times at little to zero charge. Plastic makes a lot more sense. Obviously, some people are really think that honey should never touch any plastic and they want glass. So I really think we just need to focus on a common size. And I know that a lot of people I only do this type of jar. I only do this type of jar. Well, I think people are going to have to bend a little bit. We've got to try to make this uniform and convenient. This logistically for the staff is going to be a nightmare at this scale if we don't have some uniformity to it. And also, I'm trying to be considerate of all the people that don't have a lot of honey, so the folks that produce 40 to 50 pounds a year can participate in this quite well. Yeah. So that's why I'm really leaning towards half-pound jars. They can devote 10 pounds of honey, and that's 20 swaps they can do, or only 5 pounds of honey. They can still get 10 different types of honey to go back home with them and not be too much of their own honey. So I like the idea of a half-pound jar. They can be gotten on Amazon. They can be gotten in a bee supply. Greg might even have those in a store. I don't know. Do you have any half pounds, Greg?
Right now, just 1 pound and pound and a half glass.
So disappointed.
I know.
We'll talk after this chat. But it is what it is. Well, and that's again where a lot of people are like, well, I only got the 1 pound or 2 pounds. So we're still considering it. We're probably going to release a poll in an email blast to everyone who gets a ticket, and also in the Facebook groups, and just see what people want. And obviously we can't serve everybody, but we'll try to do what's best for as many people as we can, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of fun. So there's a question that from 707 from Spirit of Toad, and I appreciate that person being so patient. Is there a temperature range above which you shouldn't graft? And that's really not specific to this time of the year as far as, well, I mean, I guess it is for some places. I don't raise a lot of queens, but
yeah.
I think does it really matter? I mean, if it's 105 degrees outside and the bees are healthy and they're able to maintain that cluster temperature of what it's supposed to be, I don't see a problem with any temperature at all. I think a lot of it can be avoided even if it's extreme temperatures. If you put an extra lid on the hive, if you have an insulated hive, I use my Apame hives a lot of times, or a polystyrene hive for my grafts, because if it's March and I'm grafting and we get some cold weather, the bees don't have to work hard to keep it warm. If it's July or August and I'm grafting, they can keep it cool. So I think even if you're not a huge fan of doing anything besides wood, having maybe that one box or two that's insulated a lot of those polystyrenes and apimays are 7 times to 8 times more insulative, and that's going to really just make it a lot easier on those bees. Little screen bottom board. So I'm not too worried about temperature.
It's probably about the same here in Ohio. We're still grafting. Matter of fact, we're going to end the year doing insemination here. And so we can kind of stretch this thing out clear and through until about the end of September with that. But I'm probably with you on the grafting. The temperatures are usually the cool side is probably more detrimental for us. On the hot side, when it's real hot and humid here, we kind of have to change our strategy with the cell starters and either get them into a place where they're a little cool, a little shady on one side of the barn, or I like your idea there with the apamay, something insulated just to keep the colony cool enough to where it doesn't affect the cell starters. This is the time of year though where everything starts to get really tricky and more challenging. I think no matter where you are making queens, which is why most folks, if they're smart, are already done with that, and they've moved on and they're not fooling with it, because take rates go down. What it takes to actually get cells pulled, and then any error or hiccup on placing cells or the colonies you're putting them in, it just quickly goes downhill in a hurry to hive beetles and things like that. So Kamon, you said 105 temperatures you're not so much worried about. Now I'm assuming the question was based on outside temperatures and how it would affect the colony more so than how hot. If someone's trying to graft in the dashboard of their truck and it's 105, I think you got some problems there. But I think the question is probably ambient temperature for the colony.
Yeah, ambient temperature for the colony. A grafting, definitely want to be in the shade at that temperature, and then you have that moist towel to put over your grafts as you're grafting.
Yeah, Spirited Toad is right down here close. I think he's over on Lake Seminole, just across the line over in Georgia, kind of southwest Georgia over there. So it's pretty cool.
Cool.
One last comment or question from Spirited Toad, which is if there's young ears in the cornfield, fair warning. Let's see. I can't. The question I think was pretty much, have you ever gotten? I'm not sure what the question was, but have you ever got squirted by a drone? And you might be laughing, thinking, how in the world would that ever be possible? But I know just today, when you're out averting drones to get the endophallus out, you'd be surprised. I wish I had a camera, because you can end up wearing some of that, and that is not good, to say the least. But I think he made a comment in joke or jest, but you'd be surprised how many times that actually happens.
Let's see here. I haven't had that pleasant experience like you, Greg. You're just doing all the fun stuff.
I guess so. There's so much to say on that, but we'll behave.
Yes, that's good.
That's why I call him Mr. Burns anymore.
Oh, Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns.
Kip Glass asks, Greg, will you be selling Premier boxes wax dipped? Absolutely. As you can see here, we're distributors for Premier and love those boxes, the dovetail joints, the big handholds that reinforced frame rest. For us, it's a premium box, and those are the ones that we're interested in wax dipping and providing. So that's what we will have at the show. Some exciting things regarding that too. So definitely keep in touch. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think we could? I think it'd be great if we could talk a little bit about August beekeeping, what people want to do right now. I know here in the South it may be a little different than where you are, Greg, but maybe not that much different. I think things kind of come together, around this time of year. Everybody has some issues like in the late summer, early fall, in preparation for winter. So we could talk on that a little bit.
Sure. August beekeeping is a huge thing, at least in my mind, as we plan for finishing out the year strong, but also more importantly, setting us up to be successful next spring. Spring prep for us actually starts about July 4th. When we get into August, there are some critical things that in my opinion, I feel like need to happen in the bee yard, whether it's a couple colonies in the backyard as a hobbyist, or you're growing it as a business. There's a few things that really need done well this time of year to set yourself up to be successful. And that's what we want to talk about tonight up here in Ohio. we have goldenrods already blooming. It's at the first varietal of goldenrod. So we're 4 to 5 weeks away from the actual nectar providing plant. That's going to scare people to death because that means fall is coming, and it's going to be here before we know it. So the warmest right now would be Tennessee and Georgia out of all of us here on the screen. Kamon, can you talk to us a little bit about how August management plays a critical role in the future of the bee yard, not only for wintering, but for building up for next spring? What are some things that are on your mind right now on getting your bees off to a really healthy finish for this year?
Well, there's several things on my mind over the years. If I've learned one thing, is being successful in late July, August, and September, the most important months for the next year's success in this area. It varies a little bit from location to location, but primarily August and September. If you have bees at the end of September that have a good population, that have low mites and have plenty of food, and they have just this great healthy cluster, there's a very good chance of them going through winter successfully, especially in the south. But what it takes to get to that point, right now it's August. We have very, very little pollen coming in. It's not very nutritious pollen. I was doing a video, so I will have a video on my YouTube channel again. It's been the longest ever in 4 years. It feels, I have done stuff with you guys, but it feels really weird. I mean, used to my life, I didn't even watch YouTube videos. That's when I told Laurel this was a really dumb idea, and now I'm eating those words, let me tell you. But now I've, we started it off and we were averaging 2.5 to 3 videos every week the first year. And the second year it was 2.5 videos a week. And so this year has been kind of different. But what I was filming though is these brood patterns don't look as good. They don't look like the late March, April, May, early June brood patterns. For you up north, that might be May, June, July brood patterns, but they're not as solid. There's not as much nutrition. And the last thing that we need to happen is for these bees to retrench a little bit and feel like, oh man, we don't have enough to support going to the max that we want. And maybe in August, when there's not a lot of natural food in Tennessee, that max might be 800 eggs a day. But then if you let them get lean on either sugar syrup or honey or something like that, maybe they'll only lay 400 eggs a day. Well, that population's going down, and this is a terrible time for that to happen. Because do you think the mite population is going to go down with that necessarily? Over time, that would inhibit having probably less brood to go into, but in the immediate future, the bee population goes this way, mite population's going this way, and more of your brood's infested because the percentages change. And that's when you start seeing most of your varroa collapses in late September and October. And it's the mites and the viruses. So August is when we do the majority of all of our alcohol washes for the year. And you can do the soap washes too. That's basically the same effectiveness. But we're doing our alcohol washes and seeing where the mites are at. We're going to do some more treatments in August. We're watching our queens. I have a video that I just filmed today where there are these 2 colonies, both of them together are probably averaging about 3 frames of bees strong. We just dropped a queen cell in there, gave them a frame of brood and a couple frames of food, and came back about 24 days later. Thankfully, both of them came back with queens, and we've got dozens like that. But these colonies are not to build up this time of the year. They're just to go into our big colonies and go, whoa, okay, this queen's not quite good enough. Or maybe if we decide to treat with formic, I've got some formic coming. I just ordered some from Hilco. And, I'm going to be using that. I'm going to look for, to me, like with the product formic, if I get a period where it's like 3 days where it's going to be below 85 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Because what I've come to realize with the Formic Pro product is that if I lose a queen in the low 80s or lower, she's no good. Or I'm applying like a full dose on a nuke or something, something retarded like that. So And that's what these extra queens are for, though, because if I hit those colonies and the queen was kind of old, I kind of need to know that she's old anyway. She's probably not going to overwinter that good, and she's definitely not going to make a big honey crop the next year. And so if that treatment or thiamol or whatever causes the colony to get superseded, these little bitty colonies with these brand new queens just get plugged right in. So it's all about making sure we have a great queen, we have low mites, dead mites, and we have plenty of good nutrition. And between now and winter, your bees do not need to feel any nutritional stress whatsoever, whether that's from you feeding them or nature feeding them. That's pretty much sums up our management. So get out there, get into your bees every other week. Do it. Doesn't have to be a long inspection. See what's going on. Take care of them. Maybe put on some robber screens if robbing's really hard. And if you got yellow jackets, find the nest, organically destroy them with gasoline, and your problems will go away. Tannerite actually is a lot more fun and probably better for the soil. Actually it's like a fertilizer. I forgot about that.
That's true.
You just help and inoculate the soil at a faster rate.
There you go.
Guys, I don't want to. I've already hijacked your thing tonight a ton, and I wanted to give my summary of kind of like our management this time of the year. August is an important month. September is an important month for next year's success. Get out there, get it done. Don't have a heat stroke. Electrolytes, water. This is not an excuse to beekeep without a bee suit either, though. Bees are typically madder this time of the year because there's not as much foraging going on, and there's a lot more stress between colonies, and all of your hornets and yellow jackets are reaching their peak in August and September. So just be safe, have fun. Guys, thanks for letting me take some of your time tonight, and thanks everybody for listening to me. Anything else I need to say before I hop off of here?
Kamon, thanks for joining us again tonight. If you have any more updates, maybe take a look at the stream team next Wednesday. Whose channel is that on? Bruce, Brian? Is it? You guys remember?
It'd be Brian.
Brian's.
Brian, next Wednesday, 8 p.m. on the Castle Hives channel. Kamon, if you have some more updates, we got an open door there as well.
Well, thank you guys so much. Have a great time, and we will talk to you soon. See ya.
Okay, Kamon, thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
See ya.
Kamon.
So, folks, if you're just tuning in to the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel, if you're checking out the replay later or the podcast, we just had Kamon Reynolds on from the North American Honeybee Expo to give the big announcement that tickets go on sale this Friday, 8/4. The website and all that information will be published on the Facebook page, also via email. When we get that information too, we'll share it so you guys can get on and get tickets. I know everyone's been really excited to get in there and be a part of this conference. So again, thanks to Kamon and Laurel Reynolds for everything that they're doing to help support beekeepers and for putting on the North American Honeybee Expo. We're really excited, and I know a lot of folks are too. So Kamon, guys, what do you think? He did a great job talking about the conference, but also kind of breaking down some critical things to think about, at least in Tennessee at this time of year. Bruce, let's go a little west from Tennessee and down to you in Alabama. Talk to us about the critical next steps for beekeepers in August in Alabama or down south.
Yeah, I agree pretty much with everything Kamon said. My toughest months when I seem to lose the most bees historically have been July, August, September. And I think the reason for that, 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, I think that's when some of my queens begin to fail. And number two, I do believe that's when I have mite issues. I think, Kamon mentioned the bee population starts to drop and the mites don't. And so you kind of have that increased mite stress. And the other reason I think that happens sometimes is if I have hives that got honey bound during the honey flow, I didn't get into the brood box, while the boxes were stacked up. And that also causes a decrease in the population because the queen doesn't have a place to lay. And so I think those are 3 of the primary reasons. We do have hive beetle pressure here. It can get really brutal. I've been seeing a lot of those lately. But I do think the hive beetles I know they're pretty opportunistic. And so most of the time, the big, strong colonies that are packed out with bees and healthy, the hive beetles aren't as much of an issue. I've had some really big hives with a lot of bees in them that have crashed very quickly, though. But I don't know if those were super healthy bees when that's happened. You can just tell the look when you crack open a hive. The bees are working in there and they look healthy. I experienced that this past week or two. I was trying to introduce some new genetics to my bees, and when I made the splits or made the hives queenless, pinched the queen or whatever I did to make them ready to accept the queens. I came back a few days later after the queens had been placed, and I had lost some of those because of hive beetle pressure. Just didn't have the population they needed. The hives weren't as healthy. But I believe if I'd had enough bees in those colonies, if for whatever reason the colonies have been a healthy split, a lot of them didn't have any issues at all with that. And so I do believe that's where we have issues with hive beetles. Some people say that hive beetles will not be prominent in sunny areas or in a strong colony. I do believe there is some truth to that, but I've had some mighty big, strong colonies crash because of that. And one thing down here in the South that you have to be careful of is having too much honey on the hive. That's one thing when I was a new beekeeper, I thought, man, I could just leave honey on these hives and let it go through next year, and they'll come out of spring just doing really well. And if you leave too much honey on those colonies, that's just a recipe for a hive beetle slime out like you've never seen before. And one story I had in 2015, I guess it was my third year keeping bees. First year I had no clue what I was doing in 2013. So second year I kind of got a little bit of an idea. In 2015 I actually started to formulate a plan, and I planned on introducing some new queens from a guy up in north, Tim Ives. I respect the strength of his colonies, and he doesn't sell a lot of queens. I don't know if he sells any anymore, but I got some queens from him. I had everything all planned out. Had 3 colonies that were stacked up with honey, just ready to go. And went down one day and kind of got them prepped and ready to go. Got my queens and went down to kind of pull the splits and make those. And there was the biggest swarm I've ever seen up in the tree. Who knows how big that thing was? It was about 40 or 50 feet up in a tree, and the bees had absconded, and they were full of hive beetle. That was really my first experience, I think, with true hive beetle slime outs. They're just nasty and gross. And so it's important that people say leave the honey on, leave plenty of honey for the bees, and you do want to leave honey for the bees, but not too much. Down here especially, it can become a real issue. So we got to treat for mites, start checking, treating, taking care of that, whatever you can do. Down here it's so hot, you got to be careful about what you use. And I ordered some Apivar, but there was an issue with supply, and so I had to get it from a different company, and so I'm still waiting on that. But I have hit them a couple of times with some oxalic acid vapor just to try and knock the mites back. I know it doesn't penetrate the cappings, I understand that, but just something to kind of get those phoretic mites off. And so that's one thing that I've done. Plan on treating for mites and just kind of rock and rolling. I've got to put the feeding piece together a little better. I need to probably get some food on these bees. But the thing is, some of these darn bees are bringing in a flow from somewhere. I don't know where they're finding it, because normally there's nothing this time of year. But those bees in Midland City, I just have a new spot there that's just an ideal spot. If you've seen the channel, I did a couple of videos recently on that new spot, and this past Saturday I went in there, just kind of peeked in there, and man, those things are just wet with nectar coming in. But there's a cotton field that's blooming just in prime time right now, about quarter to a half a mile away. Just a perfect spot, man. And all these plants and everything around, it's going to be a really good area for me. So I'm excited about that. But it just got to, that's the feeding is probably my weakest area of beekeeping. I understand the principles behind the mite control pretty well, and I understand the need to keep to manage the size pretty good. But when it comes to feeding, I've just never really hammered that down yet. I haven't fed as much as I probably should, and I'm still trying to figure that out a little bit. So my goal is to get on that a little better here in the next little while.
A great points, Bruce. And I think one of the things you mentioned there, I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, especially when Brian kind of fills us in on his strategy. The thing about feeding is feeding is sometimes one of the most underutilized methods to keep bees happy. Usually folks, when they think about feeding, it's really, they're thinking about, do the bees have store? do they need to draw any wax? And if they don't need any wax drawn and they have honey stored, then feeding is not usually part of the equation. But what's interesting about feeding, especially if you're talking about a time where you don't have supers on, you're not anticipating collecting any more. When you get into a point of time like in dearth, for instance, if you start trying to introduce new queens and you're trying to keep overall bees happy, I think one of the best things you can do, one of the critical steps, is to put feed on those colonies just so they have a sense that there is some incoming. This is going to sound ridiculous, and I don't have the a scientific peer-reviewed paper to present as evidence of such, but it does seem that there is something about the not just the essence and vibe of a colony, but when they are lacking, there's a certain demoralized attitude that they certainly have. They can also sometimes get a little extra spicy, or as Bruce would say, chippy. When you have bees that just don't have feed coming in, and bees are by design are out to forage constantly, when they can't go out and do that, I think it's sort of similar. And we got to be careful, Brian. It's that big word again. Remember, it's the anthropomorphized. Right? We got to be careful with it. But it's a lot of folks have heard about, as far as humans go, the purpose-driven life. When you have purpose, right, and you have goals, and you're putting one foot in front of the other, and you're doing something to facilitate that, joy and happiness is a consequence of that. I think this might be a stretch for some folks to think about this, but I think it's the same with the bees. When the bees don't have anything to gather, I don't think that they're living their best life. And I know that's going to sound ridiculous for others, but you try putting a milk cow on a piece of pasture where it's fair to midland at best, and there's not a lot going on there. That animal has a completely her disposition changes immediately. As soon as you open the gate and put her on a fresh pasture where there is actual, the nutrition is there, she's doing what she is supposed to do, her entire attitude changes, right? And all we did was open up the gate and let her from one paddock to the other. The same thing I think is with the honeybees, is when we get into times of the year where there is no pollen, there is no nectar, they just have this scarcity mindset to them, if I could go as far as to say that. So when we do put a little feed on there, whether it's protein or carbohydrates, it does seem that their overall demeanor changes completely, right? Whether they need a lot of that or not on the colony, that can be the tricky part. But when you're putting enough feed on there, and that's why I love bucket feeders, is we can put just enough feed on them that it's trickling in, where they kind of have that essence of, okay, there is feed coming in, but it's not so much so that you're worried about them plugging out on it or necessarily storing it all, but there's just enough then to keep the queen stimulated, keep her laying eggs, but it also keeps the foragers. It just seems to do something to their nature. I don't know if you guys have seen that, or if I'm just out in left field. Have you seen any of that with feed and how bees tend to react in times where there's not much out there for them to get?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh yeah. I tell you, everything like what Kamon said and like what we're talking about, prior to, I would say in my first 5 years, where I was just kind of, well, I'm gonna go back to the Dunning-Kruger. Okay,
right.
I was on that peak of Mount Stupid, and I was kind of just riding that wave and just whatever, and I really didn't have a plan in place, to really manage my bees. And it wasn't until I hit that rock bottom and really got a plan set of feeding and having the decent queens and really keeping an eye on the mites. It wasn't until I had those 3 items in place until I saw like my colonies, how they are now. They're just beautiful, beautiful, you know. But you have to stay on top of them. I mean, and like everybody said, this time of year, I've learned, and I've seen firsthand, like where I had colonies that I didn't quite get into them enough, And I had swarms in September where it's such a critical time of the year, at least in my area. If there's any type of hiccup in September in Northeast Ohio, your colonies where you might end up, and in my situation that I got into is I had a couple colonies that swarmed, and trying to find mated queens in Northeast Ohio in the third week of September, it's just not going to happen. There's very few out there, and where my colonies requeen themselves, and I thought, okay, they're doing good, but I missed several weeks there of, it's just such a critical time where I looked in there and I saw the queens, they started laying, they were, doing what they should have done, and I thought it was enough, but come, it was late February, early March, their cluster size was about the size of an orange, and they froze. So it's just such a critical time right now that you got to stay on top of them. And like I'm basically doing, I think probably what Bruce is doing as well. Yeah, I see David saying it looks like my camera's clouded. David, I'm working from a laptop tonight. I don't have all of my regular setup, so yeah, I apologize for that.
I thought it was a nice smoothing feature. It takes out
Exactly.
all the wrinkles and the gray hairs, and look at that.
It's
I need
like
one of those too.
It's like a filter. Yeah. I look like I'm 30, but like right now I'm doing, my OA treatments. It's just I'm staying on top of them because right now I noticed the last time I was in my apiary, the bees were a little bit more grumpy, and July 31st, I found myself pulling some more honey out of the apiary, and I'm just like, what are you maniacs doing? I really don't want to spend more honey July 31st and August 1st, you know. Um, but if you're not on top of them, this time of year, you're going to end up just setting yourself up to crash, at least in Northeast Ohio, and I'm just specifically talking about my area. And my plan as far as like the mite control right now, typically what I do, and I think I've seen a couple others in chat do the same thing, is they're hitting them with multiple treatments. And I typically will go about every 5 days, and I like to hit them with like 5 or 6 treatments. That way I cover an entire brood cycle. So yes, oxalic acid will not get under your cappings, but if you're hitting them with enough, and you cover an entire brood cycle plus a few days, you're going to knock down those phoretic mites. And then typically what I'll do as far as just management, in my apiary is after I pull off my supers in the fall, that same very day when I'm pulling supers, I'm dropping strips in them. So, it's just a nonstop process. And it's almost like when I finally pull the strips and sit down in the fall when they're all wrapped up, it's like I breathe at that moment. But like right
Yeah.
now, I think you're almost just as busy now as far as beekeeping as you are early in the year, just getting your colonies prepped and swarm management and everything like that. It's just so critical, so key right now. And like Kamon said, what you do right now, when you build up those strong colonies, you end up having a monstrous year the next year. I've seen it,
Yeah.
I mean, you all, you've seen the photos when I crack my lids in the springtime, and it's, you know, first week of April, and you're looking at a double deep, colony, and when you pop the top, and it's just every frame is just covered in bees, and you're looking like, oh my gosh. So, but yeah, this is just such a crucial time of the year. It is.
Brian, looking back at your many years of beekeeping now, I think that's why we wanted to have this talk tonight about the critical next step in August, because once you get a few years under your belt, as you go back, and whether you take notes or you're looking back at your photos or you're remembering all the things, August is that tipping point month where if you don't have it right now, you've got to do everything you can to get things squared away, or you just don't. Once August gets past us, we're outside of a window, in my opinion, of getting bees healthy enough to make those bees for the wintertime, number one. If we let August slip away because of baseball games and barbecues, it happens. But the problem is, once we find out at the end of August that a queen isn't quite laying right and there's not enough brood, and there's hive beetles, and the list goes on and on and on. When you start hitting in September and you start getting into killing frosts up north, you lose everything. No more forage is coming in, and
Yeah.
you're now relied heavily on inputs to carry those colonies through. But if we can spend, starting right now this month, accurately assessing colonies, looking at their overall strength, looking at the brood patterns, looking at the queen quality, looking at their overall health, we can start to make those moves forward to either say, okay, this colony, you know what, they don't make the grade. What do we do? Okay, what's the issue here? Do they need requeened? Do they need combined? After these several years of experience that you've had now, Brian, when you look back to August, if there was one thing that you could have told yourself, that first year beekeeper, um, what is the one thing that you now do in August that you didn't used to do, that you feel like makes the difference on your bees making it through the wintertime or not?
My first few years, um, I could just laugh, but I never stayed on top of the Varroa. And
Mm.
I use August right now as my month where, I kind of almost do similar like Cayman. This is the month where I'll do washes on every colony. Now, other months, I kind of just judge it. I'll go to my larger colonies, do a wash, and I'm pretty much the person that I just say, well, if I check half of my colonies, um, you know, and whatever my counts are in those colonies, um, and I'm going to I treat them all, you know. But August, I will check them all, and I probably will, gosh, 5 or 6 rounds of OA through August. And if I could go back, I probably would, tell that newer beekeeper, Brian, hey, don't use August as a month when it's in a dearth. And at least in my area, we don't hit that much of a dearth, at least where um, there's like nothing coming in, because we will still have enough of a trickle so that it keeps them happy, so to say.
Yeah.
But when I would always take years ago, I would always take this month and I would just kind of relax. There's still a little bit coming in, so they're okay. They don't need fed. I've never had to feed in the middle of the summer. And I would just say, let's relax for a month, and then after that, I'm prepping supers and throwing supers on. But honest, I would probably go back and say, use August as your month for mite management. That way, your colonies, are situated uh, in more of a better spot, going into that fall and then going into the winter. So yeah, Spirit of Toad. I'm Northeast Ohio, so where my apiary's at, I'm um, gosh, hour south of Cleveland. So we get where I'm at. We do get a little bit of that lake effect stuff off of Lake Erie, but not as bad. I'm a little south of that, but yeah, it's Northeast Ohio. But yeah, seriously, Greg. I mean, it's like right now, um, man, it's so crucial, And then also, what I would say too, as far as afterwards, it never really clicked in my head. And look at this, everybody's just dropping off. Bruce, he done bolted. Greg now's this empty avatar thing. So this is the Brian show. But wow, look at that. What I would also tell an older me, if I go back and that new, I just run across myself, new beekeeper Brian there, I would say look at proper nutrition, because it wasn't until I heard a conversation from Dr. Bun Christiani, Humberto was talking with Ian, and they were talking about the benefits of protein, and I had never really supplemented my colonies. And some of the points that they made were, like the number one thing that I always go back to is, and as well, Greg, about Ohio weather. Ohio weather is like a roller coaster. And right now, when you're in that critical time, well, what if you end up with rain for
Mm,
5, 7 days, 10 days? If you have nothing on your colonies and they need to build up, where are they going to get their food?
right.
So when you end up having patties on your colonies, when you end up having syrup on your colonies they're not slowing up. You know, they're basically, they have that grocery store right there. Yeah, they'll prefer to go out into Mother Nature and forage on what Mother Nature gives them. But when you get into those weather situations like we do in Northeast Ohio, I found that has really set aside from my mite treatments in August. I think it's that nutrition and the supplements, towards getting into the fall I throw my colonies, I throw that nutrition at them. So, but then part of the nutrition too, I use the Hive Alive. Those Hive Alive supplements, and you've seen the benefit of it in your apiary. Man, they have helped out. So really have helped out.
Hey, Greg, I got a couple of quick comments and then a question for you. A couple of questions. First of all, someone asked earlier, you may have addressed this while I was off here for a minute, but someone asked about putting a little bit of bleach in the sugar water and the syrup. And I've done that. I think it's a quarter of a teaspoon or per quart, like a teaspoon per gallon or something like that. But I can't remember what the dose, but it really does help to prevent that fermentation. It doesn't hurt the bees at all, and I've had good success with that. But I will say the Hive Alive supplement has that thymol in there, which has a similar effect, I believe. When I had Kamon on here a few weeks ago, just on a one-on-one chat, he talked about using that. Uses straight up sugar water, and then if he has to store the feed, he'll put the Hive Alive in there because of that storage component. But one thing I wanted to ask you, this is what I deal with this time of the year. I've got colonies that have, just say it's a double deep. Well, just for example, you got some double deeps or deep and a medium that the entire top box is full of honey. 2 or 3 frames in the bottom box are full of honey. And then you got that nice little brood nest in the middle. So they're set up just about perfectly. The hive sitting 3 feet away to the right or left of that colony has very little food, very little weight, maybe 2 frames of honey total in the entire colony, if that much. Down here, rarely is there a problem with pollen. I mean, these bees pack, there's always pollen in the colonies. I rarely have ever seen there be an issue with pollen. So how do you, when you're trying to feed your bees, you mentioned that the bees are happier with that food coming in, whether you're using bucket feeders, whether you're using in-hive feeders, whatever you're trying to use, or even open feeding. Do you go on a case-by-case basis with that, Greg, or do you just let all of them have a little bit of food? Do you equalize the food between the colonies? How do you manage that situation? Because that's what I run into. I'm like, well, this colony weighs 50, 60 pounds. This colony weighs 15 pounds. So
Yeah.
that's what I deal with. How do you, that's what I kind of run into.
It's a great question. I tell you, a lot of my hard lessons learned growing a bee yard had a lot to do with feeding was the biggest thing. I think Brian touched on that too, as far as nutrition goes. And I never really understood when to feed, why to feed, and then how to feed. And until I started seeing enough negative outcomes in the bee yard, it wasn't until I started to kind of clue in to some of those things. Why to feed is very complicated. I'll start with a very humbling, Greg, you're an idiot story from yesterday. So here I am out here, and this is, it's getting late in the year, and shout out to Ricky Rorick Bill Kurtz at Grumpy Bill's Bees. Who else is on here? Phil from Cedar Ridge, and let's see, and then what else is on here tonight? Dean McCoy is usually on here, and there's a few others. We sent queens out today, and I want to say thank you for those. And Redfish commented, thanks for the Hive Alive. We appreciate your business. We're out yesterday getting cell starters built, specifically tuned up and built for this weather. And so in doing so, we are just certain manipulations that we're doing with colonies so that they will more readily take and draw out queen cells and do it in the heat so we can keep making more and more queens, especially over the next month as we make a lot of virgins to inseminate here on the farm to keep specific lines moving forward so we can really launch those out next year. I made a huge mistake. And here I am out in one of these colonies, and I'm going for the queenless starter, queen right finisher, but I'm building it fresh. I've let this colony build up now for quite a while, build back up, and kind of get them to a place where they're healthy enough to do all those things. So here I am going through both these boxes. I'm trying to find the queen, because I like to put the queen and the brood on top over a double screen board. And it's really handy if I can just find the queen and put her up there. I can shake some of the extra bees down in the bottom box. Next day I can come back and I can graft. Well, I wasn't finding the queen. And sometimes I just move on to the next colony and I'll get the next one set up. Well, I was being stubborn, and I'm going through every frame, every box. And by the time I went through each frame twice, there was 2 frames of honey that I needed to pull out of there so I could make room for my grafts. And so I just set them on the pallet, leaning up against the colony I'm working. And I'm telling you, within a minute of doing that, it was like World War III for bees. The entire back of the barn and everywhere was nothing but a cloud of bees. And I mean ferocious. Like, they just like that quick. And so here I am trying to get this colony set up as a cell starter, and here are thousands and thousands and thousands of bees looking for a free lunch. Well, in that situation, I had called Yappy. I was talking to Yappy about something on the phone, which reminds me, guys, we have a little something to tease too. So anyways, I put the hive back. I moved the frames completely out of the way. But in that short amount of time, all those bees went from robbing out those nectar, those honey frames leaning against the colony, to testing and seeing what's inside of those colonies right there too. I had just put a frame feeder in one of them and filled it with a thinner syrup. And it only took a few minutes for the whole neighborhood to know that colony, which was a double deep, had open feed on the inside, and it just turned into a melee. So tomorrow I got to go back in there and see what kind of damage is done. I've got a feeling there's going to be nothing. There's going to be decapitated bees and a pile of just carnage on that bottom of that pallet because of the kind of traffic that was inside of there. The lesson learned is, how do we know when it's time to feed? Well, when you lay out a frame of honey and within minutes you've got a cloud of bees over you, that is a good indicator that the bees elsewhere have nothing else to really forage on. So you'll learn little things along the way. But if you're smarter than me, you won't let it quite go that long. I should have known. What in the world was I thinking, leaving frames of honey out exposed at all? I was asking for it. When you start looking at where we have our Pro Suite in totes, and there's the fittings and such, will weep just a little bit of fluid. And whenever in the morning when I go out there, when I see a cloud of bees like at 8 o'clock in the morning on a fitting, trying to slurp up any syrup, I know there's nothing going on. When they're there at noon and then also 4 and all day long, that tells me there is nothing producing enough for them. The white clover is going through little ebbs and flows where it starts to pick up after rain, and there's just enough. But learning, even putting feed on colonies And this time of year, I think it really helps them all kind of settle down. Now, if you open up all your lids and you put in frame feeders and you take your time and you fill every single colony and you have open feed all around, that's not the way to do it. You're going to cause a huge problem. For me, this is where bucket feeders really come into play. So over the next 2 weeks, all of my colonies are going to have bucket feeders on them. The reason being is it's a slow trickle feed effect. They can come in and they can pull it, but I kind of choke them down to where it'll take them a week to 10 days maybe to even pull that fluid out, primarily because I'm a really big fan of no more than 3 holes in those feeder plugs that we sell. 3, that's it. No matter how big the colony is, just 3, because I can put 1 gallon of Pro Sweet with 3 holes in those plugs. I can put those on those colonies, and it's just enough that they feel like there's just enough coming in, just enough to do, that it really kind of evens out their disposition. But it also, when you talk about robbing, we're so focused on who's getting robbed more so than who's doing the robbing. And so you're automatically looking at small colonies and you're not even thinking about big colonies. I think one of the best things you can do is put bucket feeders on big colonies. So in my mind, it's almost as though there's less of that. There's nothing out there for us to get. So let's go take it from where we can. Now, this is just my experience. This is what I do, but I'll put bucket feeders on everything if I can. The only things that I won't put bucket feeders on this time of year is if I've got small mating nukes and things like that. I'm not wasting a gallon of feed on those, right? They have enough storage on the inside to do what they have to do. There's not a lot of syrup odor, or even if scouts do come and check, there's nothing extra about those little colonies, because those are the ones that can also get robbed out in a hurry if everyone gets too hungry. So looking for signs along the way cues you into, okay, now it's time to feed. You're not just looking for storage though either. Just because your colony has honey stored and things like that, we already talked about their attitude. Keeping some feed on them this time of year, I think, is really helpful, especially when you get into right sizing your colonies for the wintertime. Do you fellas have a certain size configuration that you prefer going into the wintertime? Bruce, is there a certain size configuration that you kind of shoot for to get your bees for the wintertime? Like, what's too big? What's too small?
I try to get mine at large. The largest ones are double deeps, typically, and then they all the way from that all the way down to 5-frame nuke boxes, depending. I just want to make sure I kind of decrease the space so the bees can, that's what I usually typically do. My favorite configuration probably, and it's kind of difficult, is like a deep and a medium if it's a good strong colony. I also love 5/5 nukes. They do really extremely well down here in the wintertime. 10 frames basically, but stacked on top of each other. Maybe that's because of the heat. I'm not sure why they do so well, but I just kind of manage them according to the number of bees in the colony. With the pollination bees that I was sending off before, they all had to be a certain size, so I tried to build them up into that proper size. I just send them off for pollination, but this year I'm not planning on doing that, and so I'm going to be a little bit more flexible on what they look like. So still playing around with that. My favorite size is probably anywhere from 5-frame nuke up to a double deep at the largest. They really don't need more than that down here. But I've always
is any bigger a liability for you?
Not necessarily in the wintertime. I don't think so necessarily. I've had some that were bigger. I don't, people say that you really want to crowd the space down, and I do think there's some truth to that, but it seems to me like when they cluster, they keep that cluster warm. I don't know that personally, down here in the South anyway, that they lose a lot of heat. I think they keep the heat inside the cluster. So if you've got a colony that's has excess space, I don't know that it's that big of a deal, but I do try to keep them crowded down more. I always like, you see Mike Berry on his videos, and I do some of the same, is just checking the weight of the colonies, walking around behind them, lifting up on them. In order to have a significant amount of weight, you do have to have some space in there for that honey. And like your bees, for example, Greg, the Caucasian / Carniolan type bees, they'll brood way down, so you don't need as much space, you don't need as much food. But I kind of just manage them. That's really what my management is in this fall, and even into November, December. We're never like a month below zero or below freezing down here. We're usually within just a couple of days of 50 or 60 degrees, so we can peek in on them almost all year long. And so I I go and I peek in on them. If I've got a colony that was in a double deep in October, and then I peek in on them in December, and it's like a 50 or 60 degree day, and all the bees are in the bottom, and they're about the size of a volleyball in the bottom box. I don't need that second box on there. I may pull it off. But if I leave it on, I haven't found it to be a big deal. I don't know if that's a bigger deal up there for you guys up north where you do have such extreme temperatures or not. But down here, I don't think it's too much of a deal.
Brian,
I'm sorry.
We've got. I want to shout out to Brian. Thanks for the $20. We appreciate you. Also, Ed over at Son of One 263 Bees. Check out his YouTube channel. Ed, thanks for that too. We really appreciate you guys. There was Bruce as well. Thank you for the $20 for the channel. We really appreciate the collaboration and that donation. And also Mr. David Lewis. Thank you for the super sticker, sir. We really appreciate that too. There's I've got a list here, fellows. I know we can't get to all these things tonight, so I think we're gonna have to have a part 2. But when I think about what's critical in August, it's in my mind we break it down into things we've already kind of talked about. Feeding, we've talked about robbing. Whether we're looking at the colony, if they have enough storage for winter, that might be a little premature to make that call right now. But what we can look at is to see, is there any storage at all? Are those frames absolutely light when you pull them? If the heaviest frames in your colony are brood frames, you might have some trouble. And so by looking through, if there is not enough stored carbohydrates right now, what that does in my mind is it puts the colony at a disadvantage when we do finally hit that dearth wall or that first frost and there's nothing for them to eat. Now they are only relying on what you feed them as you feed them. So now those bees are literally living hand to mouth, but it's your hand to their mouth. And I think that's where a lot of beekeepers get into a pinch, is the colonies are starved out, even in the fall time, and they're waiting on you to be able to give them something to eat. That is usually the result of several other things going on. Late splits, weak colonies, poor queens. In my mind, that's usually where those kind of things happen. Maybe we pulled too much honey off of there and we had 7 or 10 days of rain and they burned through everything they had in the colony just to make it through. Now what? It can get a little bit tricky. So looking to see if there is just enough, if we think about it as a checking account and a savings account, that extra honey on the outside of the brood on the brood frames and the corners, those frames that are on the complete outside of the frame tucked away with some pollen. This time of year, they're going to really lean on that to finish strong making brood. If they start to burn all that up, not only do they not have any of that for brood, but they don't have any of it for them on those cold days or those rainy days that are not too far away this fall time. So by keeping feed on them now, in my mind, it gives them a little bit of something. It creates a little bit of a buffer, just enough of a food buffer where they've got a little bit in that pantry. They can kind of keep doing what they're doing. And so feeding is one of the biggest things. And especially for me this time of year, I know a lot of folks, we're starting to get a lot of orders now, starting to come in for all the Hive Alive products. It's a no-brainer. When we can get the gut biome of those bees healthy now, they're going to be in a position to be able to make all those winter bees and do it so far superior than if they don't have any feed at all. And so that I really do think there's a lot of opportunities for Hive Alive, especially because of the thymol, to keep their gut clean. And just to help give them, that best foot forward. I want to shout out for old Lee at Kodiak Farm for the super chat. Thank you all for the chats, Lee. Thanks for your continued collaboration. Hope to see you at the Bee Expo. So go ahead, Bruce.
Greg, speaking of the gut of the bee, what about probiotics this time of the year? I know you've mentioned the Hive Alive. We've mentioned feeding. Speak to that a little bit if you can. What are your thoughts
Absolutely.
on the probiotics?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a little bit of just a recap here at the end on the things that we're kind of doing But one of the huge things just over my shoulder this way, back here on this shelf, is a shelf of the Strong Microbials Pro DFM and also Pro DFM Plus 801. Um, Everything that we sell here in the shop are things that we use and can speak to, and creates leverage for beekeepers. And we've now are in our second year of using those probiotics. I know I've told the story before. We don't have time for story time tonight, but in short, we were helping somebody out with their nukes, and the nukes were absolutely on death's doorstep. And a combination of Apigard, but more importantly, probiotics, got many of those bees past the ick that they found themselves in. I've got an awesome interview with John Turpin from Strong Microbials to release, where we sit down and kind of talk a little bit more about these things. But what's important for the bees as they are metabolizing all this feed and they're doing all this late season work, whatever we can do to keep their gut biome healthy puts them in a position where when those stressors come, whether it's dearth, whether it's virus, whether it's mite overload, in my mind, it gives them just enough resiliency that it helps buffer those situations. One thing that we're doing is we're going out with the Pro DFM and from the real big bags, and we've got a little scooper that attaches to our air compressor, and I'll go through it right into the entrance of every single colony, and I'll give them a blast. Every single colony, and we'll blast the probiotic in the front entrance so it encapsulates the colony. We saw huge gains on that. Some of the biggest gains. It's easy for beekeepers to fall into the ego trap, where they feel like the future of their honeybees and success of the apiary is how they make the split, how they grow the hive, how they do all these things. In reality, if we just give the bees enough tools, they can do so much of the work on their own. By using things like probiotics, using thymol, using good products like Hive Alive, what we're doing is we're putting the bees in a position where they have a clean bill of health. That's a big deal. I know it sounds extremely simple, but when their gut is operating correctly, it's operating efficiently. So as they are digesting and absorbing nutrients, they're doing it efficiently. I know that sounds ridiculous and that sounds like kindergarten, but it's one of the things that is really overlooked. When we started using Hive Alive, especially the pollen patties coming out of the spring and late in the year, man, what a difference. The fondant with the Hive Alive in it too. I'd never seen our bees look so good. And why I say that, we were just talking about right sizing, like what was the right configuration for Bruce? What's too small? What's too big? What does he prefer? I'll talk about that a little bit as far as here in our neck of the woods. But Brian, up in Northeast Ohio, as we talk about nutrition, what does this have to do with anything? It has to do with these bees making brood and growing to a certain size. What is that right size for wintertime? Tom Nolan from Hivetown checking in from EAS. Tom, thanks for tuning in. I've got a great interview with Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan is with Knot Apiary. You guys will know those products as Formic Pro. I love those. We are also now distributors for Formic Pro, and you'll see on our website this week as well. If Formic Pro is a good tool for you, check us out at nature'simagefarm.com. We'd be happy to ship that to you, and you can check it out and use that for the health of your bees too. But Brian, as we talk about right sizing colonies for wintertime, all the things that we're doing right now that we've talked about tonight is putting these bees in a position where they are the right size going into the wintertime. Do you have a right size or a wrong size for you in Northeast Ohio?
So I've always been a double deep type person. And I think that comes from my first few years of beekeeping, where I wanted to be comfortable. And, because when you have a double deep, it's always been my practice where I will never touch any of the honey as far as spinning it out in my deeps. I always like them to be packed, and I like my colonies very heavy. Last year, I had Mr. Burns there decided to pass me off a queen, and it was very late in the season. So I set it up. I did a split, set it up in my Apame, little 7 frame Apame nuke, and that Joker was a rock star. I would, and I put oh, I forget the bubble wrap, the double sided bubble wrap over top of it. I had taken the feeders off and put my fondant, I cut a hole kind of like what Ian does. And every time I would crack that thing and just look, it literally was all 7 frames. And I'm just like, was sitting there scratching my head like, this is amazing, But that goes back to right there. If you have strong colonies, regardless, like, when I've seen people say 5/5s and whatever, if you have strong colonies, they're going to manage through the winter perfectly fine. So this year, what I plan on doing is I'm going to set up a colony in that darn little 7 frame nuke to just go through the winter in that setup. So, can you overwinter a little 7 frame box in Northeast Ohio? Yes. It's easy to do, but you have to put the work in it and manage the colony so that it is a strong colony. If you're not staying on top of the mites and they're overrun with, all of the viruses and everything, and they're not fed, the colony will crash. So, but yeah, I do prefer double deeps, but, starting last year, I overwintered a nuke. So
See, and now you've got the point of reference, and now it'd be easy for Brian to be hashtag Brian50 because now he's learning all the tricks. That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Brian, because when we talk about right sizing a colony, what is the right size for you depends on several things, including what are your goals for those colonies in the spring? How healthy are those colonies? And in what part of the country are you in? If you're up north, as far north as some of the folks in Canada, maybe you have to do things a little bit different. Maybe you have to build a bee shed. Maybe you have to have some tricks up your sleeves to get them through. I know here in Ohio, we've overwintered in as small as a 5 frame single medium. And I've tried to overwinter in something as big as triple deeps. And what I have found for us is my absolute preferred method is probably a story and a half as far as 10 frame equipment. 10 frames below with a super on top seems to be probably nearly bulletproof. I really like double deeps. Double 10 frame deeps are amazing. But as good as they are, they can also be a detriment because if those colonies are not healthy, they're the first ones to crash. When those ones crash, in January and February, there's not a lot that you really have to worry about. But if they crash and you don't know it, that's usually, you talk about a mice hotel, there are so many goodies inside of there for them to absolutely just make a mess of. You're already brokenhearted that you're down, 20 frames of bees or at least 10 frames of bees. And then you have mice and they're chewing everything up and just peeing and pooping all over everything. It just, I hate that part. So for me, that's a little bit big. I like a story and a half. I like double deeps. We can also get by with the single 5 frame deep. A single 5 frame deep isn't necessarily my choice just because as many good years that I've had bad years. And because of that, what seems to be the most even across the board is probably a story and a half. So a 10 frame deep with a 10 frame super on top seems to be just about perfect. Now, the bigger the colony is going into the wintertime, I'll say big colony meaning double deeps. I don't go anything bigger than that, not on purpose. Just for me, in our weather here, it's already a roller coaster season where we might be there might be some days where we're in single digits day and night, right? And I actually like that. I would prefer if we stayed somewhere in that 20 to 35 degree Fahrenheit temperature, because the bees just go into torpor and they just hang out and they do their thing if they're healthy. If they're not healthy, those big colonies are the first ones to crash because when they are breaking cluster to eat on those days where we'll have temperatures that are 45 to 55 degrees during the day, they're breaking cluster very, very early in the day. They're feeding inside of the colony. But then when you get to about, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the wintertime and the sun really starts to pitch, it gets cold, and it gets cold quick. And those colonies, those bees they're just, when they're not healthy enough, they're not able to get back into cluster fast enough. And you do lose colonies that literally freeze to death, or they're 1 inch away from a honey band. And it's the most pitiful thing in the world to see a colony that big that starves itself out. One of the concerns that I have with big colonies, at least here in Ohio, is the bigger the colony, at least in my opinion, the more respiration that there is inside of that colony. There's more moisture inside of there that does need to be ventilated, but there's also a little bit more of a heat signature. We've seen that when we use a FLIR camera to get an idea of how much heat is in the colonies. Those doubles are they look like they're on fire on the inside. It is true that bees only heat the cluster, but that cluster there's going to be heat that's radiated from the cluster that is going to stop at the sidewalls. And then there's going to be a point of entropy, meaning a point where energy is lost in the system. On a bee box, it's right there at the sidewalls, and it starts to dissipate. Where that's a problem is when those colonies start to warm up too much because they're too big. In my mind, when we get into those temperature ranges of like 38 to 45 degrees, they tend to want to break cluster a little bit sooner because of the kind of heat that they do generate. They can burn up a lot of food quick. So when I get to a colony that's a little bit smaller in brood, like a single with just a super, now we're talking about 40% less bees. It just seems as though they don't quite heat up so much so quick. They're not utilizing those carbohydrates because they're breaking cluster, and it just seems to work well. And then you get down to 5-framers. If they're healthy, you can get by with bloody murder. You really can. If they are clean bees, man, they can and I've done it. We can get by in a 5-frame medium. When they're sick, all bets are off, and it is just up and down. You don't know which one's going to do well. What I will say, what I want folks to kind of consider though, as this August is the most critical time to right size your colonies. When you are seeing colonies that are crashing, they're not quite doing what you want, don't be afraid to pinch that queen, combine colonies, or even better yet, if you're talking about 5-frame nukes and there's 3 frames of bees on there and they're just, they're not going to do anything with it, shake those bees off right onto the ground, move those frames to something that's stronger that can utilize it. And then we're not abandoning those bees. Those bees will 100% integrate into other colonies. Let them find new places, new colonies to live out the rest of their days, and to move those colonies to a way better position for wintertime, rather than trying to hobble along these little tiny runts that aren't just going to make it. I know that sounds cruel, but that's one thing that I've learned is in August, that's what we're doing. Today, as I'm pulling queens, as I'm pulling the queen and there's 1 frame of bees left or 2 frames of bees to carry the mating nuke, I could put another round of cells on there. But when I have 2 or 3 or 10 of those like that, what I do is combine all those to make nice 4 and 5 frame boxes to accept the queen cell. Because now I've got way less risk of robbing. Number one, I've got way less risk of hive beetles coming in to slime a colony out because there's a little bit more of a population in there. When you leave 3 or 4 frames of resources open with 1 frame of bees to protect it, you've got major problems on your hands. And that's the last thing that you need is a hive beetle slime out in August. It's like it creates a hive beetle seed in your yard that just grows and grows and grows. And that's the last thing I think that any of us want. So right sizing is important. And I think you guys did a good job talking about what's the right size for you. And I think, Brian, you nailed it. The health of the honeybees determines really the outcome of those size of those colonies, whether it's a 5-framer or whether it's double deeps.
Yeah.
Bruce, what's going on in your neck of the woods right now as far as your honey's off? Bees are probably starting to get a little bit more of an attitude. They're probably robbing a little bit. You're thinking about feeding. You've just introduced a bunch of new queens. where are you at as kind of where is your bee yard headed for the rest of this year, do you think?
Well, I've been focusing so much on the Ozark yard and trying to get that thing fixed with the new queens and everything, and that's really kind of how I dedicated my last couple of weekends. But I've peeked in on the bees in Midland City. That I think that is going to be a really good spot. Those bees are bringing in that cotton nectar right now. They're happy as they can be. It looks like springtime out there walking around. They just look great, and so they're doing pretty well. They got 20 colonies there. But the Ozark, the queen introduction, I will tell you, as crazy feisty as those bees were, I humbled them. I had to find a spot to put,
Nice.
theoretically 30 new queens. And so what I did in a lot of those colonies is I took a lot of them had a lot of bees in them. I would take, basically on some of them, if there were double deeps, I would take 2 nukes and set them right there, shake all the bees into the bottom box. Or if I found the queen, I'd leave her in the bottom box. I'd take them away to the other side of the yard. And some of those colonies had so many bees in them, and they were angry. They flew back, and on some of them I had 2 nukes sitting there, and they filled those nukes up, left some brood there. And then the donor colony, the foragers all flew back, so they didn't have near the population, and they were no longer feisty like that. And so it was kind of cool to be able to go in them, and just everything seems to have calmed down a little bit the way it looks right now. But there's more colonies there, but they seem to be more calm, and so that's good. But I've got to get down to the other areas, Slocum, Applin Farms, the bees up at my uncle's place up there. I've kind of neglected them. I did put some BSH type, treatment-free type queens in there to try and fix some of that problem. I got to get in those and see how they're doing. So I got a lot to do, but my biggest thing is I want to get the mite treatments in the bees this coming weekend and just start focusing on feeding. And I've got a lot of cleanup I've got to do, dead outs or honey boxes I took off and let them rob out are just sitting everywhere. I've got to just get everything cleaned up and ready to go for winter. So it's just a lot of work right now, and I hope I'm not neglecting the food. There's a bug right here on my. Got it. Okay. Hope I'm not neglecting the feeding. I've got to get some food on them too. So I got a lot to do, but we're just real busy right now. But overall, the bees are looking probably as good as they ever have at this time of the year. I haven't lost as many percentage-wise this year as usual, but I am seeing a few slime outs. I know I've seen signs of mites. I've had some deformed wing virus I've seen in some of the shiny bees, for the, what they call that, paralytic mite syndrome, the shiny bees. And so I haven't tested for mites, but I know I've got some mites. And so I got to get on that. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And when you speak of the size, Greg, I agree with you. I think the story and a half is really that's kind of the ideal size for close, for the winter bees to me. I just don't like the uneven boxes because I love in the spring to be able to pull, if you have double deep, if it's a good strong colony, it's so easy to make splits that way because all the frames are the same size. And that's one reason I like to do that. However, you can split a medium off and make a split with that too. I actually did that some, with these new queens. Some of those are mediums that had some brood in them that were story and a half colonies. I pulled the top box off that, had brood in it, and it was a medium, set it on a bottom board, and, there was my split. And so, it is easier though if the frames are all the same size and the brood. Like Brian, it makes it much easier. And that's one reason I'm hesitant to just. But the deep and the medium really is kind of, for this area anyway, it is the ideal brood size, in my opinion. Different bees do different things, but my experience has been around here lately. I think that deep and medium is a very good configuration. If you've got a double deep 8 frame, that's about the same size, I think. It's just a really good size for a brood nest, I believe.
Where right-sizing makes a difference is when you start looking at bees as a unit and an asset, and you're investing in their future, and you're going to have them go through the wintertime with the anticipation of them surviving and coming out of the spring. The critical steps that we're taking in August dictate what those bees do in April. I really believe that. And so as our operation here is we sell nukes and we sell queens. Of course, we sell supplies and we deliver packages and things like that too. But I am setting these colonies up for a purpose for next year. And what I want these colonies to be able to do, be able to allocate this yard of bees I'm going to pull nukes from, and I'm going to pull 2 to 4 nukes out of every single colony, and then have enough colony left behind where it may make fall honey, but it'll at least be big enough to be in that right size going into the wintertime, with its entire purpose after pulling nukes is to get big enough, fast enough to make drones to keep saturating my areas for queen mating. So I'll take large colonies that I have watched over the years, that I continue to tune up their genetics, and I'm pulling bees out of there to make splits, building them back up so that this time of year they have a lot of drones on hand to help with those later queen mating opportunities. There are other colonies that we are setting up to be successful coming out of the spring, where their goal is to do nothing but just be massive drone colonies. So they don't get split. They just get built up, and I crowd them out, and I want them to make drones so I can move that drone material throughout the entire yards. And then there are other colonies that we'll raise up, and we'll raise them to do nothing but split out to make queens. So every colony that goes into the wintertime has a purpose, where we earmark what their best use is for the following year, and that dictates what size we try to get them in. Anything bigger than a story and a half, we try to equalize and balance everything out eventually to where we use all that material to help bolster up those double deeps. If those double deeps are too big, we need to pull some of that back to boost up the story and a halves. And then anything that's kind of left, like if there was really small mating nukes, the unintended consequence of making queens late is sometimes you end up with, some 4 to 5 frame nukes that aren't really quite big enough to justify using a 10 frame box for. And so you're stacking up some of those and making 5/5s, or just a 5 frame single. Or this year we're gonna be utilizing a lot of double screen boards over top of 10 frame boxes, so we can plug in that 5 frame of that 5 frame colony can go into a 10 frame box, but it's going to go over top something that's stronger to have that heat kind of come up through it. So right sizing also isn't just a tool to figure out what size colony does it need to be to get through the wintertime. It's what size colony does it need to be so when it comes out of the wintertime, it can also have a yield. Those really small colonies that are 3 to 5 frames, coming out of the wintertime, yeah, they're going to make it, they're going to build up, but those are not going to be the colonies you're pulling four nukes out of. Your story and a halves or double deeps, those ones coming out of the wintertime, those are the ones that you're going to be pulling nukes out of, shaking bulk bees out of for queens. Those are the ones that are really creating true asset and pay really long standing dividends. So that's why it's important to do the work now, get those bees healthy, get them right sized according to your plans for those bees moving forward. Brian, we've got a couple shout outs here I want to make sure we get to. Cottonland Apiaries, thank you for that super sticker. We really appreciate your support. The one and only, the prospector himself, Chris over at ECP Bees, thank you for that super chat. And Chris says he's been feeding some Pro Sweet this time of year. Man, I tell you, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but that's all that I feed is Pro Sweet year round. And very rarely am I ever. The only time I'm thinning it is right now, and it's in cell starters. That's it. All my other colonies is Pro Sweet with Hive Alive mixed in it, and that's what everyone is getting. So I love that you're doing that too. It makes a huge difference. Special shout out to Mr. J.W. Irwin. What a cool guy, a longtime cattle breeder. I enjoyed conversations with him on the phone, and looking forward to having him out maybe sometime around September 16th, right here at Nature's Image Farm. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. I'm going to get a couple of these comments passed through here before the night goes on and we don't get them up there. But David at 139 Alton Mo Beco, Greg, I'm a truck driver. Can I get a truck close to you to buy some buckets? Absolutely. Go to our website, nature'simagefarm.com, hit that contact us, shoot me an email, and we'll be happy to meet you here. We get trucks in and out of here for deliveries for things all the time. So no reason why we can't get you. Even if you're driving a 53 footer, we can get you in. No problem at all. We'd love to have you. Jeff Jeffers asks, Greg, are you going to have any queens ready to sell anytime soon? Unfortunately, Jeff, the answer to that is no. We took pre-orders this year, and unfortunately, we got absolutely humbled and caught by the short hairs with a massive cold snap that not only caused us to pinch the queens that were out on mating flights then, but we lost all the cells that were in the cell starter. So what that meant is we lost about 4.5 weeks of the season, and are just now getting caught up on all the pre-orders. So unfortunately, we absolutely will not have any extra queens to sell this year. We're a small outfit. We're making and selling less than 2,000 queens this year. We hope to bump that up more so next year. But what we are going to do is, it's safe for us to usually 40 to 60% of what we know we'll make to go ahead and pre-sale so we can get folks locked in on dates. The problem is we got hit so hard with weather that really threw that plan out the window. This coming spring, our strategy is we're only going to sell very few pre-order queens. That will lock folks in on the months that they would like the queens, but it also gives us some breathing room because we don't have so many folks who are waiting on queens at certain time frames. It'll still allow us to deliver those queens to those folks, and then when we have extras, we'll put that word out that we do have extra queens and can ship. I think it's just a little better way to make sure everyone gets their queens and they're not waiting so long. So I want to say thank you to all of our queen customers this year. We really appreciate your patience. We've had a lot of fun doing it. There are so many exciting things. There's not enough time to talk about it tonight, but we're as part of our breeding program, we have some lines of bees here that we're working with, and also we're getting into insemination of those queens. And so I'm really excited about the future of those. Mr. Brian Lee, thank you for the super chat. He says, thanks for all you guys do for the community, Brian. We do it because of folks like you and your sons, all the folks here in the chat tonight. You guys are awesome, and you guys make all this thing really worthwhile and worth doing. So thanks for that. Brian, am I missing any more super chats, or did we get to them?
No, I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if you're just tuning in now, earlier we announced that the Learning Yard has a special guests this weekend. We've got Rob Pollock and Lori from the Robbies. They're going to be here prime time, up close and personal, talking about oxalic acid vaporizers, why, when, and how to use that on our bees this time of year. And like with anything, there are pros and cons and trade-offs, but I think that there are still a lot of wonderful opportunities using oxalic acid this time of year for the right colonies, for the right reason. And so we're going to meet here in the shop. We're going to put Rob on the top. We're going to have lights, camera. We're going to have cameras. We're going to record the whole thing with the live audience here. So I'm looking forward to getting that content out in the future. We're going to talk about all that, but then more importantly, we're going to go right out front here to the Learning Yard and actually put that information into practice. That's the big thing. We're a big fan of not just talking about these things, but actually walking it. And we're going to go out and show folks exactly what we just talked about, how to use it. And I think it's going to be a great learning opportunity. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you're in the Ohio area or surrounding states and you think you might want to come out and check out the Learning Yard and maybe even pick up an INSTANTVAP for yourself, we are giving away free mite wash cup with every INSTANTVAP purchase this weekend. For more information to go ahead and secure that, you can go to our website at nature'simagefarm.com, click on pickup, and we'll have them here ready to rock and roll. So if you want to attend the Learning Yard and you're not already on our list, go to our website, nature'simagefarm.com, click on the Contact Us, shoot us an email, and let's see if we can't get a seat for you here at the Learning Yard here at Nature's Image Farm. It's going to be a lot of fun. What I love about the Learning Yard here is we get to collaborate with really awesome folks in the community. There are a lot of products out there, but we choose to work with folks who are actually making a positive impact in this community, just like Tracy and John here at Hive Butler. Love the product. Uncapping tanks, the Hive Butler totes, they're awesome. They provide a lot of value for a lot of folks. We have them here in the store for you to feel, touch, see, know what they're about. We'll be using them out in the yard on Saturday too. So you'll kind of get an up close and personal look of that too. One of the things that we actually sold out of, and we sold out quickly, and we don't have any of them at all, except for what's out in the learning yard, is our Lighthouse horizontal hives. And what a tremendous asset and a blessing those have been over the last couple years. And Ricky Rorick, I just sent him some queens today. But Ricky says the horizontal hives will get locked up with honey really bad this time of year. Man, I tell you what, one thing, it was totally unexpected. Jane with Steve and Jane, S&J Honey here in Hopewell too, they've got a lighthouse colony, and we helped to pull some honey off from them. And we are just yanking deep frame after deep frame out of the horizontals, and theirs and also ours here. Look, I want to have an entire episode just on the lighthouse long hive, the horizontal hive. What we were able to do in that one colony in one calendar year is unbelievable. And I want to kind of get into, maybe we can get Ricky back up here again this year, and we can kind of go over that. But man, there are a lot of opportunities with these horizontal hives from horizontal bees. We've just created a ton of nukes and queens and honey all in the first year. They do an amazing job. And we just got cleaned up here with our extraction line of just, when you pull deep frames of honey out, I mean, and you pull them out of a horizontal, it's just, man, is it awesome. So anyways, yeah, Ricky's 100% spot on with that. There's probably a lot more questions in here. I don't think that we're going to get around to all those tonight. But as we sort of go to wrap this thing up tonight, guys, I know, Brian, I asked you if there was one thing that you could go back in time and tell that first year beekeeper Brian. You mentioned it was what was a couple things: nutrition, but also keeping the mites off, keeping those bees clean and free. Bruce, as you look back to first year, Bruce, if you could go back in the Wayback Machine, what would you tell first year Bruce? Man, you really got to do this. Hey, Bruce, hit that unmute there for a sec.
Man, I'll tell you what.
Nailed it. Good job.
My mentor told me, like Brian mentioned, mites and beetles is what he talked about. He said you got to keep the mites and beetles under control. I didn't necessarily believe him, so I went on after a year or two, I went into the treatment-free thing for a while, and then came back into a believer and have been more intentional about that. But one thing I would say if I went back to that first year or two is patience is important. I think it was probably the first year, it may have been the second year, but I think it was the first year when I kept thinking my hives were queenless. I couldn't find the queens, so I'd call my mentor up and he used to sell queens a little bit back then. I'd say, man, I needed a queen. He's like, just give it some time, Bruce. It's going to be okay. Give it some time. And I would say, no, I know I'm queenless. So he'd sell me a queen or two, and I'd put them in there. And there's no telling how many virgin queens either murdered my mated queens or my mated queens murdered the I don't know. There's no telling how many queens I probably spent. First year beekeeping with four colonies, probably spent $150 on queens back then. And the next year I decided I would listen to him, and I waited, and I noticed that, that beautiful milk brood that starts to show up after you think they're queenless. You go in a week or two later, and there's those eggs and the beautiful milky substance at the bottom of the cells. And I said, what is that white and milky looking substance? He's like, well, those are your new queens. They're starting to lay. And so, I was so impatient. I thought I was queenless. I panicked. But what I found over the years is if you give them a couple of weeks, if you think they're queenless or something's wrong, many times they rectify and fix the problem. And if you go in a couple of weeks later, a week or two later, and their problem's not fixed, then you need to get on it, But that can be dangerous because some hives can crash. But when it comes to queen right, colonies, I bet, in a good, strong colony, if they look like they're queenless, or the population's down, they look queenless, probably 80% of the time you come back a couple of weeks later and they've taken care of the problem. They've either superseded or swarmed, and they're fixing their own problem. And so I would just say patience. Don't get in a hurry. Just be patient with the bees. Let them do their thing. and you will lose a colony here or there. If you go back in a couple of weeks, there's no eggs, no nothing in there, then you need to probably do something about it, but just be patient.
That's awesome. If I could go back and tell myself, I'm not sure I want to. I don't know if I want to get into that.
There's all kinds of stuff I could say,
Tonight,
but that's one thing I would focus.
Greg, I know probably the two words that their wife would tell you, you need to tell your old self this.
Mm-hmm.
It would probably start with something like, "Hey, knucklehead."
Yeah. The reason I'm apprehensive, and I find myself dancing around this a little bit. There was a comment here. Let's see if I could bring it up, because it does matter. And a lot of this has to do with not only our approach now, our approach then, and kind of how we also portray our approach. The question is here now. This from Honeybee Live: is there anyone out there that doesn't treat for mites? And then that's a beautiful question. Absolutely. I didn't treat for mites for several years, and I had a consequence is a certain word or certain connotation, but I had certain results based on that. What I found is that by keeping the mites off the bees, it reduced the viral impact on the bees, and then therefore the bees started growing leaps and bounds to where they were healthier than they ever could be. For us, what we're doing here at Nature's Image Farm is, yes, we are looking to nature. God provided this enormous opportunity for us to work within this as husbands of this land, stewards of this land. And when we bring anything on here, whether it's pigs, sheep, goats, cows, cats, oh my God, lots of cats, but especially bees. Bees get into a weird area for a lot of folks because they're bugs. And it's not quite the same look and feel as a Jersey cow or even that large black hog, okay? But at some point in our journey, we decided to take a little different approach with that, to where if we were going to bring bees into this context, then we were going to take full responsibility for their health. And that no matter what we did, we could not get these bees to evolve in the time frame that we had with these bees on Earth to try to get them into a place where mites weren't a problem. And the fact of the matter is, mites aren't the problem. The problem is the viruses the mites carry. And the problem with that is we only understand so very little about the viral impact when it comes to the bees and how they're affected by those viruses. It's fair to say we all have a fairly decent understanding of the evolution and mutation of these kind of things when it comes to human health. When it comes to bees, we only know so much, and it feels like as we try to make ground and understand, we only can understand that now we call it deformed wing virus, or we call it parasitic mite syndrome, or we call it cyanide virus, lake cyanide. We don't fully understand the root causes, and we don't understand how these viruses are evolving. So what we're trying to do is remove mites from the equation is one part of it. However, just because that we do treat some of these colonies doesn't mean that we're, number one, anti-treatment free, that we're opposed to treatment free, or that we don't treat colonies here too. We are running several lines of bees here in hopes that some of these eventually, maybe in the future, start to express either hygiene, but more importantly, I don't think the answer is with bees that are hygienic. I think the answer is bees that are resilient. They're resilient to the viral expression from whatever that it is. Because this year it could be varroa mites. Next year it could be some other unknown boogeyman. That's beekeeping. So what I'm focused on and what I'm interested in is trying to have bees that are resilient to those viruses. And we're seeing some changes in our genetic stock, and we're seeing bees that can keep 1% mite loads from nearly all the year. That's a big difference than what it used to be years ago. So as we work on the health of these bees, when we're knocking down and treating the outliers, there are some colonies that get very little and sometimes even no treatments here, but we're monitoring it and we're doing it responsibly, but it's also part of our breeding program. I could spend all night and bore you guys to tears about that. But I think it's important to understand that we're not anti treatment free. We are not anti treating. We are proponents of taking responsibility for the health of your honeybees as stewards of the land. When you bring livestock into your backyard, your homestead, or your farm, I will stand my ground and say that I do feel like you are responsible for giving that livestock its best life while they're here on Earth. And if you're in a situation where you have a different soil biome, you have different neighbors as far as beekeeping, or believe it or not, you even have feral bees that are loaded full of mites and heavy viruses, the most important thing that you can do is monitor that, but do it honestly and with as little bias as possible to make the good choice for those bees so they can move forward. That's probably all I want to say on that tonight. But if I was going to go back and tell my first year me something, it would be, hey, knucklehead, this is future Greg. And future Greg just wants to tell you, you're going to blow $40,000 in bees. You're going to kill hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of colonies trying to achieve the epitome of something that does not exist. The fact of the matter is, there is not a strain or genetic of bee that is at least known to us in North America that is 100% virus resistant.
Mm-hmm.
That is the end game. That is the end goal. I would have told myself, take a different approach. Still strive for that, but let's not be stupid. You're going to waste a lot of money. You're going to kill a lot of bees. And at the end of the day, that's on me. That's what I would tell myself. I would say, be smarter about your approach. And remember that there are no absolutes. And that's a story for another day. Bruce, as we wrap this thing up, what's new and upcoming for Bruce and Bruce's bees this week?
Just going to do some of the stuff we talked about earlier. Going to just try to get on. Hopefully the treatments will arrive and I can get them on the colonies. Just keep working on that and just trying to walk through some of the things we talked about tonight. Got a video coming out hopefully in the next few days of my experience trying to introduce these queens in late July in these colonies. And I used pushing cages. That's a little spoiler alert, which I've never done before. And I made some mistakes, so I didn't get 100% take. But I'm really excited about trying these queens out. Just another spoiler alert, they are Michael Palmer queens. Kamon was gracious enough. He kind of figured out a way for me to get some of those queens. And so we'll see how they do.
Nice.
I know that Greg's stock is a combination of Michael Palmer queens, along with, I think, some of his own local stock, kind of like what you've done up there at Nature's Image Farm, Greg, with Bob's Bees and your own local stock. And so I do want to end up with a combination of a Kamon Reynolds type bee along with a Greg Burns type bee, kind of a cross, and see what happens. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do. And so that's where I'm at. But the Ozark Yard is my bee lab, so to speak, where I'm really trying to get that done. That's where my most feisty bees have been, and I'm attacking the problem mostly there first. So that video is coming out. It was not a perfect result, just a spoiler alert, but it's pretty exciting at the same time. And I learned some things, and I did some things wrong, and I'm going to be looking for advice for anyone who has used pushing cages in the past to help me figure out some things with that, because I didn't have quite the results I wanted. Of course, the high beetle pressure didn't help on some of them. So I don't want to give the whole video away, but it's coming. I've got a lot of editing to do still. It was a lot of footage. I've got to get it whittled down, but I think it'll end up being a pretty interesting video. And I've got a lot to learn still in introducing queens in the heat of summer down here in Alabama, but I'll get there. So that's mainly what's coming up, just August beekeeping and this video. I'm working on this video right now.
Awesome. Brian, what's coming up for Brian Koper at Castle Hives this week?
I tell you, just treatments and, and I'm just going to say about the treatments. I recently was able to add the INSTANTVAP to my apiary. I spoke to Rob several times before, and it's like, oh, I pull the cord out, and you go through all that.
Mm-hmm.
And his other vaporizer works perfectly fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when I walked out there with that darn INSTANTVAP, I went through my whole main apiary, I think in
20
probably
minutes.
yeah,
Probably
I
less
don't
than,
even
yeah.
think it was 20 minutes, and I had treated every single hive. And I did not have to then ravel up an extension cord and do any of that. It was just, and afterwards I text Rob and I was like, I love this thing, you know. So, but yeah, I'm gonna hit him with the treatments, and then those darn jokers. You know, I'm gonna use Bruce calls his jokers sometimes. Those jokers actually have. I have some other supers that I need to check, and it's just like, you know, and I want to make sure that those are pretty much emptied out, so that when we do get into a little bit more of a flow kicking in, um, you know, they have the room. So, but I couldn't believe it. I had left one super that wasn't quite all the way capped out, and they were still working it. Every frame had nectar, so I thought, well, I'll give them another week or so, let them cap it out, let them process it a little bit more. And I went to that colony and pulled them all, and I thought, well, let me check this one right next to it real quick. And when I just cracked it and lift the super, I thought, oh my God, there's weight here. I I need to go through
Jokers.
and yeah, you know, and just check that. I just want to make sure that they're all set, you know, and it's like right now, pretty much for me, it's just getting them clean and getting them prepped and ready for when the fall flow starts. So
Looks like everyone's a big fan. If you have an
Yeah.
instant vape, drop us a comment here. Looks like Lee from Kodiak love my instant vape. John Laver over at the Shekinah Honey Works here in Ohio says it feels weird how quickly I go through my bee yard with my vaporizer. If you've ever spent time using a corded unit, you know they're great, they're cost effective, they work, they're awesome,
yeah,
but you know it takes a certain dance of how you're orchestrating using the tool. With the instant vape, you almost feel guilty because it's just like bloop, you're just going through so quick. um, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. Cottonland Apiary, yep, love my instant vape. Yeah, they're awesome. They make it go so incredibly quick. It really, you know, truth be told, fellas, I mean, when it comes to I'm always trying to be careful how I say things, because there's half of me wants to just knee jerk and say something, but then I realize, you know, if I would have told first year Greg these things the way that I'm thinking it, first year Greg would have said, "What are you talking?" No, you know, so we as beekeepers, even if we have the right tool, and it's going to take us a certain amount of time to do it. Like if we know the bees need fed, doesn't necessarily mean we're actually going to go out there and drag out the pumps and drag out the totes and drag out the hoses or drag out the buckets. And right when we know the bees need treated, even if it's the time for OA or Formic or Apigard, we know that they need treated, but there's still like a hitch in the giddy up. Like, okay, I got to order it. I got to get it. I got to make time. What's the temperatures? Da 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 da. What I love about the instant vape is it takes all that out. Because do you have a battery on charge or charged? If the
quick.
answer is yes, you've got no excuse. You go out, click your battery in, turn it on, in 2 minutes, it's hot, it's ready to go. Hit your plunger, get your dose, drop it in, boom, it's vaporizing. 45 seconds to a minute and 10, it's done. You're on to the next colony, you're on to your next colony, boom, boom, boom. If you have a couple extra plungers and you already have them loaded and ready to go, like especially if you've got 5 frame boxes and 8 frame boxes or 10s or double 10s, let's say you have a 2 gram, you want a 2 gram dose and you want a 4 gram dose. Yeah, you can certainly turn the dial, right? But you can also have 2 of these things, and you can have one that's set up for 2 gram, one that's set up for 4 gram, and you can go through a bee yard and just blast them with an average time of 1 minute or less and get them cleaned up. That's a big deal. And what I can say is I'd like to try to simmer down all my thoughts on how I think we got to this point of being successful keeping our bees alive. But I can tell you, this is going to sound silly, but just doing it, actually just doing the thing. You know, Bruce, I can remember for a little while was talking about I think it was one of the content creator channels that he would watch would say the most important thing is just hit record. Well, one of the most important things as a beekeeper is just get out there and do it, to use the Nike phrase. Just get out there and do it. And there's no excuse with the instant vape. It is so fast. It makes it, hard to say it makes it pleasurable to be blasting your bees, but when you know you're going to get in and out and it's going to help them, makes a big deal.
Oh, it's
So
fun.
Jeremy Hartzog says he has one. It's great. Our Phil, there's Phil, Cedar Ridge Bees. I love my instant vape. Phil, I sent you some queens. You ordered so many, I sent you an extra. I was going to call and tell you this, right? So, Phil, when you get those bees tomorrow, there is one of them, the entire cage, I mean, the entire thing looks like scribbled Pepto Pink. Now, that's a freebie. That's an extra one. But I want you to pay attention on where you put that queen with that cage. And I just want a progress report on it. I got something just back here going. I just want to see what it's about. So on the super uber Pepto Pink one, where the cage is even Pepto Pinked out, keep an eye out to track that one. And I'm not telling you what's going on with it, because it could be good, but it could also be bad. Let me know what you see in it. So anyways, Phil, I appreciate your friendship and also your support there. There was a bunch of Instant Vape fans here. Of course, our locals, pals, Steve and Jane, right here in Hopewell. What I love about it is the only beekeeping neighbor that we have for miles and miles and miles is Steve and Jane, and they have our bees. And we help them out when we can too. And guess what they do a fantastic job of? Keeping their bees clean. So I think that's absolutely just awesome. If you are interested in an instant vape or learning more about oxalic acid, when to use it, how to use it, why to use it, is this a good time of year? Is it not a good time of year? Think about stopping out and joining the Learning Yard live this Saturday, 10 a.m. If you're not on the Learning Yard email list, go over to naturesimagefarm.com, click the contact us, shoot me an email, and we'll see about holding you a seat. Guys, there's a lot more things I just want to keep talking about tonight, but just to recap, we had Kamon Reynolds on from the North American Honeybee Expo to announce that tickets go on sale this Friday, 8/4, and more information as far as the pricing on that will all be released if you stay tuned to the Facebook group, North American Honeybee Expo, also to Kamon Reynolds' personal Facebook page. If you're on that email list, you'll get notified there too. When we get that information, we'll also post it to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat Facebook page. Next Wednesday, the chat will be on Castle Hive's YouTube channel, 8 p.m. Wednesday, where Kamon's going to unleash a bunch more updates about the conference. So you're not going to want to miss that one either. If you are looking for products like Instant Vape, Formic, Hive Butler, Guardian, all those names, Premier Bee products, we'd love it if you'd stop by and let us earn your business here at Nature's Image Farm. We're a big fan of these products. We use them here in the field so we can speak to them. We can answer questions. If you're not here close and like to have them shipped, we can do that too. So we'd like to put you in touch with these good products. And the most important thing about these products is, yes, these products are awesome and they work, but we are believers of supporting those who are making a positive difference in this community, literally being the change that they want to see by being a lighthouse to others. All the folks that we collaborate with here and we distribute their products have great products, but they're even better humans. And that's important for us to keep in mind too. Other than that, fellas, any last words before we cut loose for the night? Bruce?
Not really. Do you want to talk anything about September, or are we still thinking about that? Or
Oh, look at that. Nonchalant tease there.
September,
September 16th.
but
Brian,
hang
what
on
do you
a second.
think? Should we let the cat out of the bag on that?
Before we talk about anything related to September, I do want to add September is the best month out of the entire year.
It absolutely is. I got married in September. It's the best year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know why, though, also because you were at some surprise birthday party thing that I had no clue about in September.
Oh,
So,
Brian's birthday is September.
Yep.
Wow, that's right. I actually look, Brian, what day is your birthday?
4 days after this thing.
Okay, so this surprise thing that we're just kind of kicking around could also be Brian's birthday
No,
party.
no.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing cake in your future. Streamers, pinata, pin the tail on the donkey. Who
No.
wants to be the donkey? No comment.
I tell you what, if there was a rope swing, I would do a rope swing into the pond.
Ooh, that'd be cool. Maybe a zip line down into there. Well, let's just go ahead and if you've stayed on this late, we want to thank you for tuning in to the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. If you're checking out the replay or on the podcast feed later, we really appreciate you guys. You're the reason why we do this. This community is great because, like the honeybee is to the hive, we are better together. And we just want to say thank you for your continued support and your collaboration. You know, one thing that we're all about here at Nature's Image Farm is building that community and providing opportunities to support others. And what we really are excited to announce, should we announce it tonight or should it just be in its own special thing?
Yeah,
You
go
think we
ahead.
should let her rip? Bruce, what do you think? Bruce is muted, so I'm going to say. Bruce said no. Bruce said no way, jokers. I'm out. I'm nothing to do with that. Is that what he said?
Never done
We
this.
can we can have a teaser here, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bruce says teaser. Is that like a half reveal or a no reveal?
Greg, you just whatever you think, Greg. You just handle it.
All right, look. You've hung on this long, way over it's 2.5 hours. I think we owe it to the people just to give them a little something at the end. Because all those who didn't stay this long, they're not going to know about it. And only those that have stayed on this long will know. So it is absolutely, I am so excited and honored to announce September 16th, Nature's Image Farm here in Hopewell, Ohio, will be hosting the first annual Stream Team Fall Field Day. That's right. Bruce Jenny's coming up. Brian will be here. It's going to be a field day where we're going to meet with all of our folks here and just have fun. We're going to work some bees, kind of show some tips and some tricks. We're going to talk some things here in the shop. So September 16th here at Nature's Image Farm, the Stream Team Fall Field Day, and Creators Convergence. More on that later. As always, I want to remind you guys to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.